Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto's biological mother was Kaguya Otsutsuki. After the war the village betrays him, only 3 people left close to him. The Bijuu resealed against their wills. In an attempt to bring the Bijuu back to him so he could save them, he inadvertently reforms the Juubi. After speaking to it he finds out who his real mother is. Kaguya Otsutsuki, the woman he defeated in the war. Descendant of Amaterasu and the Shinju. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard! Chapter 6. Naruto smiled as he and the others sat down just in time for Aries to burst through the doors of the fast food restaurant. He had the patrons under a mist illusion, so no trouble would be caused. He could feel the bolt and the helm in War God's bike as his foxes went to work. He just needed to mess with Aries a bit. Well, if it isn't the War God. What could you possibly want with this little ragtag bunch, he says, smirking at Aries. Aries frowned. The son of chaos wasn't supposed to be on this quest. He had a bad feeling he was being played, but shook it off, deciding that no one could get the drop on him. Well, isn't this an interesting group? Son of Barnacle Beard and Owl Head with a satyr and a demi-primordial. I just came to visit and offer you all some help, he says, stealing a seat and sitting down next to the table. Naruto has to struggle to hold back a smile as he can see Percy clenching his fist, being influenced by Aries' aura. Why would we need your help, Percy says, glaring at the War God. Now normally Naruto would have smacked him, but he needed this. He needed to keep Aries from his bike long enough for the foxes to do their jobs. Two-tailed foxes were special. They had the ability to transform into perfect replicas of items, aura and all. He sent the foxes to switch out the real godly items for imitations and send the real one to the fox's summon realm for the time being. Of course he had them leave a marker on Aries' bike so he could get to him at any time. Aries chuckled at Percy. I like your guts, but when an Olympian comes offering help, you take it. I can offer you transportation, info, and supplies. All I ask is for you all to go retrieve my shield for me, then I can give you a ride to the west, he says, lowering his sunglasses to give Percy a view of his flaming eyes. Naruto noticed they were much wilder and harsh flames compared to Hestia's, whose eyes were calming to look into. He shook off the thought, as she was his patron. He went to focus more on the conversation just in time. Why should we go and grab your stupid shield? Just do it yourself, Percy says to Aries in a harsh tone. Annabeth looks at him in shock while Naruto finally lets out a laugh. He has a point, Aries. We have supplies in my seals, we have transportation with my foxes, or even another way, and I already know whatever you are planning to tell us, he says, starting Aries dead in the eyes, ignoring Aries' anger. Also, I can feel ill intentions rolling off you in waves, Aries. We don't have time to do this as we are on a deadline to stop war, he says as he stands up, making Aries do so as well. You might be a son of that old bitch Chaos, but don't think you can do whatever you want. He yells, melting his glasses. Naruto frowns. Just because of my lineage doesn't mean I think of myself as all-powerful. I just know when to decline an offer that could get these kids in danger, he says, summoning his eyes. Though you might want to watch your back as you just called the creator of everything an old bitch, he says as he motions for the kids to follow him. Aries pales a bit before storming off. You will regret it, kid. I can make it so you will always fail in battle, he says, slamming open the door. Sure, and the asshole can kill me with his lightning. He yells at Aries as he absent-mindedly swats away a bolt like it was a fly, making it crash into a street sign that was across the street. The bones he used as an insulator with a bit of wind chakra infused in them on his hand were a bit charred, so he made them break off and fall to the ground, turning to ash. Aries glares heavily at him and storms off. What the hell were you thinking? Annabeth yells at him. He sighs and looks at her. We have a deadline, we don't need anything from him, and he would most likely bring us near trouble. All we need to do is eat, grab some food for the foxes, and be on our way, he says as he grabs the food from inside and brings it out. Eat up and then we can get going. I need to talk to a summons of mine alone, he says as he walks off. Why is he all in charge? It's my quest, Percy says, grumbling. He needed to get to Hades and save his mother and get the bolt from him. Grover pats his friend on the shoulder. Percy, the thing with Naruto is that he has insane powers ranging from cloning himself, use of those weird floating orbs, his eyes and his own bones. He has survived to be 20 or so and has experience. He is only doing this to keep us safe, he says, making Percy frown. As that was going on, Naruto walked away from their hearing range and summoned another fox. It was a small one-tailed fox. So did the twins do their mission? He asks it. The fox smiles and nods. Yes, Naruto-sama, the items are in this scroll, a small scroll proof in existence. Also they placed the marker and are in position. Did your side go over well? She asks as she sits down. He nods. Yes, it went perfect, Yumi. Ares went away none the wiser and he is planning to attack us later on, but that is perfect for what I have planned. Only thing left needed is Hades' agreement to the deal I have thought up, he says, pocketing the scroll. True, he could just give them back, but he needed to prove Ares took it and that he was being controlled by a certain titan. Yumi nodded. We are ready whenever you need us for travel. Until next time, Naruto-sama, she says as she disappears in a puff of smoke. Naruto sighed as he looked up at the sky. He really didn't want to be on this stupid quest, but it was either tag along or let Percy be his idiotic self and possibly go off on numerous tangents, wasting time. He walked back to the group and sat down with them. We can leave in 10 or so minutes. We need to head to Los Angeles as we need to retrieve something from Hades, he says as Percy nods along. Yeah, we need to save my mother and get the bolt from him, he says, getting a smack to the back of the head. Hades doesn't have the bolt. Why would the god of death want more work? He lost his helm of darkness during the solstice as well. We are going to save Sally and strike up a deal with Hades, he says as Percy rubs his head. Now eat up so we can leave, he says as he conjures up a bowl of ramen. The ramen he made with Hestia's blessing was always the best. Another reason he liked the woman. She was kind, sweet, beautiful, and much more. He blushed a bit and shook those thoughts out of his head. He can't be having these feelings for her, can he? After a few minutes of confused thinking for Naruto, he summoned the same foxes back to him. We need to go to Los Angeles. After that we should be fine, he says to Taro as the triplets get the others situated. Taro nods. We will get you there in record time and protect you if there is any troubles, he says as they dash off. Naruto keeps an eye out for any monsters as they went through Las Vegas and towards LA. He could feel some auras near a hotel. They felt like powerful demigods, but he shook it off as he focused on the task at hand. As they slowly made their way towards LA, he used the nature energy he still held inside to boost his senses. He felt Ares following behind them a good distance back, and he could feel the auras of the fake godly tools. They gradually made their way to LA and the foxes got them as close to DOA recording studios as possible as the aura of it kept them from going too close. Okay everyone, Hades is expecting us so it shouldn't be that bad. Though do not piss Hades off, he says, looking to Percy mainly. Percy grumbles, but they nod and walk inside. They enter a waiting room with ghosts floating all around. The kids look around while Naruto walks up to the front. Hello Sharon, I believe Hades is expecting us. My patron Hestia informed him, he said, getting the ferryman's attention. He raised an eyebrow in confusion until his phone rang and he answered it. Yes sir? Yes, they are here. Oh, they are allowed in? Even the little kids? If you say so, he says, before hanging up. He looks to Naruto and nods. Hades is expecting you, so just head down the elevator and it should take you directly there instead of the run around, he says, waving them off. Naruto smiled. Why thank you sir. He turns back to the kids to see Percy staring in shock at one of the ghosts. It was Gabe. Naruto walked up to him and activated his eyes. Gabe, are you harassing Percy here? He says, making the apparition of the man scurry back in fear. Those eyes. Those eyes. He yells, going into panic. Percy looks to Naruto in shock. Why is Gabe scared of your eyes and why is he dead? Mom told me you both kicked him out, he asks, confused. Naruto sighs and shrugs his shoulders. I ended his life as she was afraid of what he might do, and to be honest, he was a terrible human being, he says, shocking the kids. Now come on, Hades is expecting us, he says as he goes to the elevator. The kids nervously follow behind until they are all in the elevator. Once in, Naruto hits the button with Hades' symbol on it. The ride down is silent as they stood nervously minus Naruto. When the doors open, they see themselves in a throne room in front of a throne made of obsidian and bones. "Well, how nice of you to join us. My sister spoke great things of you," Hades says as he stands from his throne. Hades had shoulder-length straight black hair and dark eyes. He wore pitch-black toga that seemed to be made of shadows. "Lord Hades, thank you for welcoming us to your realm. I am here to negotiate Sally Jackson in return for your helm. All I ask for is help exposing the culprit to the council," he says in a respectful tone as he bows to him. Hades was one of the only gods he had respect for besides Hermes, Demeter and Hestia. Hades got the crap end of the stick and was banished just for his domain. Naruto knew how it felt to be shunned for something out of your control. He looked to the others and gave them a look telling them to bow as well. Hades raised an eyebrow at this. He knew the boy wasn't being sarcastic, but from what he heard from various sources that he had trailing him, that this boy did not show any respect to any higher-up gods. He downright disrespected Zeus at every chance he got. "Stand, son of chaos, and let us talk more of this deal," he says, creating seats for all of them. Naruto nods and sits down. "The one who stole your helm also stole the bolt, but I fear he is being controlled by an old enemy, someone you should be familiar with since he is your father," he says, making Hades nod. "Yes, I have felt him stirring inside Tartarus, but my brother won't believe me. He thinks it's a ploy to overthrow him," he says with a tired sigh. "All I ask is for you to help broadcast the fight with the culprit, to help broadcast the confession as well," he asks with a bow. Hades strokes his chin. "Fine, but I get my helm back right now, as I can feel it on you, then I will help you with the rest," he says, extending his hand. Naruto nods and smiles, pulling out the scroll containing the godly items. He unrolls and unseals his heel. It is a pure black helm with swirling gray wisps on it. He places it in Hades' hand and bows. Hades smiles as he puts it on his head. "Okay, so how do you want me to help you exposing him?" he asks as the helm changes into a dark crown. Naruto smiles. "Just be sure the fight broadcasts to all the council, and we need a quick exit from here to seem like you kicked us out," he said as he stood. "What about my mom?" Percy yells, annoyed. They had just given Hades back his helm without getting his mother first. Hades frowns and snaps his fingers, and shadows gather to form a screen, and the image of Sally laying on her bed appears on it. "She is safely returned home unharmed. You are welcome, son of Poseidon," he says, slightly glaring at the boy, making him shrink back in fear. Hades turns back to Naruto. "You focus on the perpetrator and I will broadcast it all." "Good luck, son of chaos," he says, tapping him on the forehead. "You are always welcome back here. You are quite respectful," he says with a smile. Naruto nods and bows to Hades again. "Thank you, Lord Hades, and if you ever need me, use this," he says, handing him a marker, "or just contact my patron," he says as he stands. Hades nods and pockets it. "Now I am sorry if there is a rough exit, but it is for the sake of acting," he says, snapping his fingers, enveloping the group in shadows. "San Francisco Beach, if that's where the fight is, but it is now XD. Thankfully, Naruto's shinobi instincts helped him land on the water gracefully as the others fell in. He summons clones to help them as he walks towards the figure in front of them. He frowned as Ares walked up to him. "Did old bonehead kick you out? Surprised he didn't kill you, though I wanted the honor of that," he says, drawing his blade. Naruto mentally dispels the clone back in camp, causing the nature energy to flow into him, making the sage markings appear. "You knew he didn't have it, didn't you?" "And that's because you have it," he says, making Ares frown. "How the hell do you know that?" he asks as he pulls out the bolt and helm before smirking. "Oh well, I'll just place the blame on you and Barnacle Beard's kid. It'll seem like I was saving Olympus," he says as Naruto frowns. "Oh, poor Ares, the proud god of war now lowered to a goon to obey some chunks of flesh down in a pit," he says, making Ares glare heavily at him. "No one controls me. That dream wasn't real. He can't be back," he yells, having his eyes briefly but very clearly flash gold. Naruto smirked as he walked forward, keeping the clones back to watch after Percy and company, knowing Percy he'd rush into and fight Ares. "You get all that, Hades?" he asks, causing the death god to appear floating above them. Hades. Hades smirks. Why yes I did, and so did the entire Olympian Council. I have fulfilled my deal, but I wish to keep broadcasting this. I can tell it'll be a good fight, he says as he sits in a floating throne. Ares glares at Hades and then back to Naruto. How the hell does Bonehead have the helm? I have it. He yells, shaking it for it and the bolt to turn into two foxes with twin tails each. Dispel. Naruto yells to the twins, getting their attention as they poof away, and Ares stares at him in shock. Oh, I knew you had them long ago, and at the fast food restaurant I made the twins replicate them as I pocketed the real ones. I could have ended the quest, but I wanted to prove the asshole that things were going on that he needs to know about. Now Ares, you can either take your punishment peacefully, going back to Olympus, or I can restrain you, he says, making Ares roar in anger, charging at him with his sword. Naruto sighs and quickly blocks it with a bone pulse he drew out of his palms. He didn't have enough time to unseal Tenno or Yamato, as Ares was fast. Not too fast, but enough to catch him off guard. He blocked wild slashes from the war god as he yelled in rage. You will not make a fool of me. He yells as Naruto blocks every strike. You did that yourself. He yells back, dodging backwards as he fired finger bones at the war god, making him recoil in pain. That gave him enough time to unseal Tenno and draw it. He had to push for a Susanoo, hopefully it would give him a rib cage and an arm. He takes a deep breath. Susanoo. He yells, shrouding himself in silver energy as vertebrae appeared behind him. Slowly the ribs formed, and then it got difficult. Naruto had to push forward to grow an arm and create tendons. He tried for another arm, but the most he could get was a bone arm with no tendons. He also couldn't make it form a head. Ares looked at him in confusion. What the hell is that? He yells. Naruto takes some breaths and looks to Ares. The one who will bring you back to Olympus, he says as he swings his fist down on the war god. Ares tries to block, but finds his sword shattered into a million pieces as the glowing fist crashes down into him, sending him barreling into the ground mercilessly. Naruto groans as the motorcycle transforms into a huge boar and crashed into him, cracking the Susanoo's ribs. He groans as he struggles to keep the ribs together. He grabs the boar and throws it far away just as Ares breaks the Susanoo arm without tendons. Not so tough are you, he says with a smirk as he spits out Incher. Naruto knows he can't reform it nor repair it as it takes too much energy to even keep it on for a long period of time. He feels a pull in his gut as he looks down to the sand and he gets an idea. If Shinju is all the Bijuu together, then he should be able to use their abilities. He jumped back and let the Susanoo fall. He took some deep breaths as he remembered how Shikaku was and how he looked. He felt a pull and went with it. He opened his eyes to reveal the eyes of Shikaku. Beast transformation, one tail, he says as sand starts to collect around him, forming claws and tails and the markings of Shikaku. Ares was confused as suddenly the sand exploded, and when the vision died down all that was left was a massive raccoon made of sand with strange markings and weirder tail. The fuck? He says until the sand around him stabs him in multiple places. Now I don't have much time in this form, so I'll make this quick, he says in a voice that sounded like a mix between his and Shikaku's, but he knew it wasn't as Shinju was still intact inside him. Kid, I will explain how this is even possible later, just focus on incapacitating Ares for now, Shinju says as he keeps the transformation up. Somehow Naruto was able to access the old fractions of himself. He figured it was because he held all their souls together at one point, and since he was a natural at using his cloaked form, it only made sense that he could pull off beast transformations. Naruto nodded as Ares broke the sand spikes that drove through his arms. Brad, I fought scarier looking things, this isn't shit compared to them, he says, smirking as he summons another sword. Naruto smirks and opens his mouth. Slowly orbs of clear and dark energy start gather and collecting in front of his mouth. Naruto kept in mind the ratio of forming Bijuu as it got larger. Once stable, he looked Ares as he charged at him and yelled Bijuu, firing the orb at him at a great speed. Ares never saw it coming as it hit him dead on and exploded fiercely. The sand around them was turned to glass as Naruto moved his tail in front of Percy and the others. Hades was in shock, but smiled, glad that this demigod liked him and helped him. Percy was staring with his mouth wide open at this all. At the beginning he wanted to fight Ares, but he was glad he didn't as he feared he wouldn't be able to defeat him. Annabeth had the biggest glint in her eyes as she drooled. She couldn't wait to question him about these interesting abilities. Grover fainted once the massive skeleton formed so he'd be filled in later. When the smoke and dust died down, Ares was shown heavily injured in the center of the glass crater. His clothes were all but evaporated, leaving his leather jeans now shorts, losing his shirt, jacket, armor, boots, weapons and anything else on him. His arm was mangled and the other burnt beyond recognition. He was bleeding a steady flow of incure and was clearly unconscious from the pain of being hit with the equivalent of an atom bomb. Naruto, still in his beast transformation, poked Ares, sending medical chakra into him to at least heal the cuts and stabilize him. He eased out of the transformation, making the sand ripple off him, and his eyes returned to their sapphire blue color. Once it was all away, he buckled over. Hades quickly caught him. "Nice job, Naruto, now let us go to Olympus, as I believe you all have a bolt to return and Ares needs medical attention," he says as the others nod, still in shock. Naruto quickly unseals the bolt and tosses it to Percy. "It's your quest, you deliver," he says in a hoarse voice, exhausted from using Susanoo and an untested beast transformation. He'd definitely train like hell to get the other forms. Hades nods and snaps his fingers, taking them all away to Olympus. Olympus Council, beginning of the fight. Zeus was in shock. His own son, being controlled by the remains of his father, had stolen his bolt and his brother's helm. Now the son of chaos had summoned a terrifying skeletal construct. Artemis shivered a bit at the Susanoo, but noticed it wasn't as complete as it used to be. Ares was getting off lucky. She was angered that her Roman side took over and made her fight Naruto. She feared how Ares would fare against it, though it looked weak, so he might be able to break it with brute strength. Apollo and Hermes were taking bets who would win with the other gods and goddesses. Sufficient to say Naruto was winning. Hephaestus was tinkering with things and recording the fight as blackmail material, and so he could broadcast it on his Hephaestus TV. Demeter smirked at Hestia as she blushed at seeing her champion fighting so masterfully. She had been having feelings for her champion for a year or so now and was struggling to admit them. Demeter was the only one who knew of them, as she was the only one who wouldn't judge her and actually help her. Aphrodite could swear she felt love in the room but couldn't for the life of her pinpoint it. It felt so strong but hidden. It annoyed her she couldn't read it. Athena was angry at the blonde. He destroyed Medusa's curse and she could not find Medusa anywhere. She would definitely question them about this idiocy. Medusa sullied her temple, in her eyes, that was deserving. Poseidon was a bit annoyed. This was supposed to be his son's quest, but after seeing Ares and the son of chaos fighting, he was somewhat glad his son didn't fight the war god. Hera was upset that she wasn't able to get the demigod to possibly become her champion. She didn't like such a powerful demigod not under the control of the council. The fight was intense when all of a sudden it got even more intense as the son of chaos transformed into a gigantic raccoon made of sand. The voice was bone-chilling. "Just what else can the damn boy do?" Zeus yells in rage. The boy was too powerful for his own good. First that skeleton thing, and now he could change into a beast taller than any monster besides Typhon and even bigger than the gods in their full height. Hestia was surprised. Naruto had told her of the Bijuu and of Shinju, but she never knew he could transform into them, but she felt he just recently discovered it. She frowned as Ares was hit with the Bijudama, but she knew that while under Kronos' control Ares would have stopped until he was unconscious. "Wow, Hestia, your champion is full of surprises," Hera says to her with a frown. Hestia nodded and frowned. She knew Hera was trying to get her to give Naruto away. Over the years she has been trying adamantly to do so. Once the battle was over, they flashed over to Olympus and Hestia went to her champion and took her aged form to help him walk. She gave Hades a thankful look that he smiled and waved off. She helped him over to the hearth where he sat for the proceeding since he wasn't officially on the quest, hence how she was able to help him without breaking any ancient laws. She sat next to him in her younger form and silently held his hand. He was unconscious from overstressing his body, but in his sleep, he held her hand back, making her blush darkly. After some time Zeus looked over to her, luckily she let go by then. Sister, wake your champion, we need to speak to him, he says glaring at the unconscious man. She frowns and gently shakes him. Naruto, I'm sorry to wake you, but Zeus requests your attendance, she says, making him stir and open his eyes. He smiled at her and got up shakily. She helped him up, and once he stood, he rubbed her shoulder and smiled. Thanks Hestia, he says as he summons a Shikujo to help him walk. He groaned as he got to the center of the throne room and frowned at Zeus as the god was glaring at him. Most likely trying to find a way to smite him for no real reason. What is it? As you can see, I am very exhausted after fighting a controlled Ares and using an untested technique, he says, leaning more on the monk staff. Zeus glared at him. You have been called in under suspicion of breaking a goddess's curse, he says, looking to Athena. She nods and stands. You broke a curse on Medusa, how do you plead, she asks. He groans and looks to Hestia, who nods reassuringly. I broke the curse because she has no reason to be cursed, he says, making Athena glare and Annabeth frown. She was cursed because Poseidon took her to your temple. She had no idea it was your temple. You curse her because you can't curse Poseidon, he says, and turns to Poseidon. And then you just abandon her even though your blessing could break her curse, but you just left her alone. I decided to give her back the life you gods took, he says, tuning back to Zeus. Think of it this way. I removed a threat and neutralized it in a peaceful way instead of the asshole's constant smiting, he says, making Zeus grow red in anger. He had enough. In a quick motion he fired his master bolt at Naruto only to be shocked. Naruto held out a hand and turned on his ice Preta path, he thought as he absorbed the bolt with ease. Preta path was the only Rinnegan path he could use without trouble or the need of help from Shinju. Stop with the fucking smiting for no good reason. He yells in annoyance. I just got you that back and the first thing you do is try to zap me. He yells as he walks back over to Hestia. We didn't dismiss you. You still need to be punished for injuring Ares, he says, making Naruto laugh hysterically. He attacked me first, which I would like to point out is against ancient laws. He was under the control of a titan and would have killed me and stolen your bolt again if I didn't stop him, so instead of trying to punish me for no reason, how about a thank you? He says, staring at Zeus with an annoyed look on his face. Zeus glares at him and sits down, going silent. He refused to thank such an ungrateful demigod. Hera frowned and turned to Naruto. On behalf of my husband, I thank you for retrieving the bolt and saving us from going to war, she says, flashing him a kind smile. Naruto wasn't as dense as he used to be. He knew she was just doing that to seem nice. Now he knew that Zeus really did throw Hephaestus off Olympus from his knowledge, so she wasn't all that bad. He still didn't trust her all that much. He just nods and walks back to Hestia. I'm going back to the house, see you later, he says, flashing his patron a warm smile as he rubs her arm before flashing away. He can teleport? Hermes says, shocked. He thought only gods and goddesses could teleport places. Hestia nods. It is a technique his father created when he saw his mother flash away and grew the concept which he was a natural at, she says, tending to the hearth, mostly to hide the blush on her face. Just who was his father if he managed to get the attention of Chaos? Apollo asks, semi-curious. Hestia frowns, wondering how much she should tell them. His father died shortly after Naruto's birth, so he's lived in his own for these 22 years. For the first 4 or so he was in an orphanage until they kicked him out, and he's lived on his own since then, she says, turning back to them. Hera frowns, curious as to his father was as well. Oregon. Naruto sighed as he continued to use the Shikujo as a walking stick as he made his way to his bedroom. He laid down on the bed and sighed in exhaustion before falling asleep. Hestia flashed into his room and smiled as she saw her champion sleeping. She wasn't one to ever fall in love, she was committed to keeping her vow, but feared it might be broken in the near future. This thought brought a dark blush to her face as she shook it away. She knew she loved him. She fell for him nearly months after she told him that she had made him her champion. They had shared stories and food, which she discovered he was a great cook and incredibly family-orientated by the way that he behaved with Talia. Both which happened to be turn-ons for her apparently. Hestia may be the virgin goddess, but that never meant she didn't want a child. It was just that Zeus was afraid of her having a child since she was the eldest child of their parents. She sighed as she ran her hand through his hair and leaned down, in a haze. As she inched her lips closer to his, once they were mere centimeters away, his eyes opened, and in shock Hestia lost her footing and their lips met. After what seemed to be hours to both of them, Hestia backed away shakily, her face as red as a cherry. I am sorry, she says, trying to run only for Naruto to grab her wrist. Hestia, please don't run, talk to me. I'm your champion, I'm here for you, he said, looking into her warm eyes. He would definitely have to thank Shinju for waking him. Hestia nodded, still blushing, and sat down next to him on the bed. I need to be honest, for a year or more I have had feelings for you. I shouldn't be having these, but I do. I have never felt love like this ever, she says, blushing and looking down to her feet. Naruto smiled and held her hand. Hestia, you don't have to be afraid of having feelings. I have felt the same way as of late, and I was trying to decide how to tell you, so this kind of makes it easier. He strokes her cheek and smiles at her. You don't have to worry about Zeus, I won't let him do anything to us. I love you, Hestia, he says as he kisses her gently. She had never felt as happy as she did now as she kissed Naruto. He was very gentle with her, and she could feel he cared for her deeply. She kissed back and leaned more into it. As the kiss ended, as they needed a breath, they stared into each other's eyes. I love you too, Naruto, she says as she lays in his arms. Seconds later, smoke fills the room and an audible poof was heard, signaling a summon entering the room. When the smoke cleared, Talia was shown standing in front of the bed. Over the months her hair had grown to go past her shoulders, and one of her bangs was tied in a ponytail with beads dangling from it, with the kanji for mountain, nest, and bird painted on them, and a golden feather dangling from it as well. Her golden coat seemed to have embroidered flames on the bottom and the words Eagle Sage of Tsunoyama on the back of it, and Tsunoyama means nest mountain. In her sleeve Zetsu was obvious with his glowing eyes. Under the coat she wore a sleeveless black vest, buttoned up all the way, with dark jeans and boots on. Around her was Tsunade's necklace in clear view. Talia looked around until her eyes landed on her father, who had Hestia in his arms. She was shocked and she went in protection mode she used numerous times to guard him against single women. In one quick motion she jumped into her dad's arms and glared at Hestia. Naruto chuckled and hugged his daughter as Hestia still held onto his arm. Talia, I am glad you are back, but do not do that again. Me and Hestia were having a moment, he says, smiling down to her. Talia pouted, but she's a goddess, they don't date, she says, getting a bop on the head. You know, Hestia is a virgin goddess and has never been with anyone, plus she is different from the other goddesses and gods, he says, making her frown. Fine, but she'd better not hurt you, she said, glaring at the goddess who was blushing from being caught. Hestia smiled and held his hand. I have to go, but I'll be back, she says, laying a kiss on his cheek before flashing off. Naruto smiled as he ruffled Talia's hair. Do I have a story to tell you, he says as she swats his hand away with a smile. So do I, Dad. My sage training was intense, she says as she hugs her father again and getting a warm hug in return. Over the next hour or two he listened intently to Talia's story. Apparently, the eagles drew their nature energy from the air, thus needing to be off the ground or at least in motion. It shocked him as he was taught to stay perfectly still, but at least the way she had to move was in the form of a fighting style, so she wouldn't be left defenseless. Though if she didn't draw it all in one go, she had to expel it all and try again. They also helped her get over her fear of heights, which she had been trying to in the past, but stopped after she started focusing on the Rasengan. Though thankfully the eagles taught her the staying still method as well, he'd have to teach her the shadow clone technique. Talia explained how she was able to use nature energy easily once she got the drawing it in problem over with. Great job, Talia, he says, ruffling her hair with a kind smile. I am so proud of you, though I always have been proud of you, he says, making her smile happily as she swatted his hand away again. Thanks, Dad, she says with a smile. So, tell me what you have been doing while I was away besides getting a girlfriend, she says with the last part in annoyance. Naruto chuckles and pets her head. Well, while you were away a lot has happened, he says as he starts to tell his tale. He told her of his training and saving of Luke, which made her smile. He told her of Sally and of Percy, who turned out to be her cousin in a sense. He told her how he was very idiotic and how he met Annabeth and how he found her too prideful. He mentioned the use of Susanoo and how he had made amends with Artemis. He told her of the quest he took some control over and how he beat Ares mercilessly and returned the bolt and helm. And he finished up by telling her of the council meeting and how he yelled at Zeus and got annoyed at them all. Wow, Dad, you've had a busy schedule. Well, at least we can relax for now, she says as Zetsu slides out after waving to Naruto. Naruto nods and smiles. Let's hope it stays that way for now, he says as he lays back down with Taliah next to him as she too was exhausted from her training. -6 months later. I am terrible at writing dating scenes, so I will just mention stuff they did on dates. Over the 6 months Naruto had been training heavily to use more beast transformations. He was now up to 3 tails, nearly to 4 tails, and could finally summon a 2-armed basic Susanoo with minimal difficulty. The beast transformations were tiring, but he could keep them going for a few hours at most and even use the abilities of each Bijuu. And basic means full body, tendons and head, but no weapons or extra arms/heads. Taliah was making great progress with her elemental Rasengan as she had Sage Mode to help keep it from getting out of hand. She was going for a lightning-based version. Her Sage Mode was different as it made her hair turn light brown with a white undertone, like an eagle, with golden eyelids and dark green eyes. Instead of just the eyelids and potential other markings like he had. Today he was taking a break from training as he stood in front of an incredibly fancy restaurant as today was his and Hestia's date night. Over the months he and Hestia had grown even closer. Even Taliah was opening up to her. She called her mom once by accident, something she denied adamantly and with a furious blush on her face whenever mentioned. They went on numerous dates to various places, movies, diners, restaurants, and much more. They also made out numerous times, in her elder form of course. She never stayed in her younger form at his home as that was only for Olympus. Tonight, he wanted it to be special as he was going to ask her to marry him. He knew it wouldn't be until he became a god that they would truly marry, but he still wanted to ask her. He had rented out the entire restaurant to keep it just them. He even had clones doing everything for them. He checked the ring in his pocket. He had made it himself using the creation of all things to make the regular bronze and crystal release for the diamond on top of it. It had taken him a month or so as he wanted to make it perfect for Hestia. It was a dazzling bronze band that he infused with celestial bronze. The diamond was colored like fire, it had hints of red, orange, and yellow in it. Just like Hestia's eyes. He pocketed the ring again and took a deep breath just as Hestia arrived. He smiled as he stared at her. She was gorgeous. She wore a cream dress with a modest cut, showing barely any cleavage and slit down from her knee down. In her elder form and in this new dress he could see her figure clearly as it wasn't hidden in her baggy dress. She was a high C low D, but he wasn't a pervert so he looked only for a second. She clearly had a nice hourglass figure as well and her hair was down to her middle back. She blushed as she tried to cover herself with her hands, still embarrassed to be out of her normal dress as it brought up memories of Hera and Aphrodite being terrible to her for being apparently prettier than them. But around Naruto she was able to be herself again. She had enjoyed the months she had been with him. She truly loved him and their relationship was going along great. Demeter and Hermes were the only ones that knew and even helped keep attention from them. "Shall we go in?" she asks as she holds his hand. She was excited for today. She felt something big was going to happen but couldn't think of what could possibly happen. Naruto steeled his nerves and led her to the table. He pulled out her chair for her and then sat down. The dinner went nicely as they talked about anything. They never ran out of things to say. They would talk about his past, her days on the council and anything else that came up. When it came time for him to propose, the clones knew and left the dining room. He took one more deep breath and looked into her eyes. "Hestia, you know I love you and have loved every second of being with you for these 6 months, right?" he asks as she smiles and nods. "Of course, and I love you and being with you too." "What is this about?" she asks, confused. He took a deep breath and got down on one knee in front of her. I know you are a goddess and I am but a demigod, but I love you Hestia with all my heart. So, Hestia, will you marry me? He says, opening the ring case, showing her the ring. Hestia was speechless as she saw the ring. It was the most beautiful ring she ever had seen. She never expected him to propose. She knew he would be a god eventually, but then she remembered her vow. But that wasn't important at the time. She cried tears of joy as she held Naruto's hand. Of course, Naruto, I love you so much, she says, making Naruto smile. He slides the ring onto her left ring finger and kisses her sweetly. I cannot wait for the day when I become a god and can be with you forever, he says after she kisses him back. She was crying tears of joy as she stayed in the arms of the man she loved, overjoyed to have the opportunity to be with him forever. As they left, Hestia remembered something. What happens if anyone notices the ring? She asks, not wanting to ever take it off. He smiles and runs his finger over the ring. I enchanted it to only show itself to those who have no negative emotions towards me or you, so that means only Demeter and Hermes will see it, he says, making her smile as she held his hand. Also, my oath of being a virgin will bring problems, she says, blushing, as the farthest they had ever gone was the time she put his hand on her breast as they kissed. Naruto smiled. Well, I'm sure Styx will give me some challenge in exchange for dissolving your vow, he says as they smile and walk on, hoping to stay together forever. -1 month later. The news of their engagement went well with Naruto's side of the family. Kaguya was overjoyed and cried whenever she saw the ring. Amaterasu tried smothering Hestia in hugs. Talia liked it as it meant Hestia was serious about it. Tsunade was happy for him for finding Hestia, as was Shizune. Gaara was glad that his closest friend found happiness, as he thought Naruto deserved it after how everything went before. Also, Hermes and Demeter congratulated her and was glad she found someone. They also would work extra hard to help them hide it from the other gods and goddesses. Over the month, they had spent the time loving the others' company and kissing, a lot of kissing. Naruto would be doing that right now if it wasn't for the news he received from a clone he left behind as a bird in camp. Ethan had poisoned Talia's tree and Chiron was getting all the blame. He was worried that would dispel Talia's clone, but found that the nature energy from being in the tree kept it alive, but the second it was to be removed it would dispel, causing a lot of trouble for him. He didn't really want Talia to exit the tree, as then she would have to return, but even if she did go back, he would be there with her and he would stay her father. Apparently, they issued a quest to find the Golden Fleece, an artifact capable of using nature energy to heal deadly wounds, grow plant life and much more. Theoretically, if he drew in some of the cloth's abilities, he might be able to infuse it into something else. Both he and Talia were interested in it greatly, as it would make going into Sage Mode a million times easier and might be able to boost his Mokuton abilities. He found out Percy went against camp orders and was choosing to hijack the quest. He swore the boy was a worse idiot than he was when he was young, and that's saying a lot. Currently he and Talia, in her Kushina disguise just to be safe, were following the quest. They had just left to go into the Sea of Monsters, which he learnt was in the Bermuda Triangle. Talia frowned at the water. Since she was a child of Zeus, they generally weren't allowed in the water, just like how Poseidon's kids weren't allowed to fly. She turned to her father. Now how are we supposed to follow them, because you aren't ditching me, she says, crossing her arms and glaring at him. He chuckles and ruffles her hair. I got 2 solutions for that, he says, getting his hand swatted away. He unsealed a large gray hide, the hide of the Hydra, and threw it into the water. I offer this to Poseidon to ask permission for me and my daughter permission to travel through your domain, he says as the hide shimmers away and blue glow envelopes the both of them. I take that as a yes, he says, smiling at her. We still need a way of traveling, as I doubt even with our large Churka reserves either one of us could make it there without getting tired, she says, making Naruto nod. Yes, I have a way of fixing that. I just need to go into Sage Mode and then we can go, he says as he sits down, drawing it in a very small fraction faster since the Bermuda Triangle was nearby. After some time, he stood up bearing his sage marks. So how are we going to go there? She asks as she sees her father step out onto the water. He closes his right eye as his left one changed to red with yellow iris and a crimson pupil. Beast transformation, 3 tails, he says as his back starts to grow a crab-like shell, spikes grew from it and 3 shrimp-like tails grew from him. Under the shell was red, muscle-like tissue. His arms grew the same kind of armor as the shell as his hind legs disappeared. On his lower jaw, teeth like horns grew from it pointing upwards as his forehead did the same but downwards. He grows to Isabu's full size and looked back at Talia. "Get on," he said in a voice sounding like Isabu's calm voice and his. Talia nodded and walked up one of the tails and onto the back of the beast her father turned into. "How long can you keep this up, Dad?" she asks as the set off, going a pretty good speed. "Nature chakra should make me hold it even longer, maxing it to half a day. Even if I go out of it, I can return to it without much trouble as long as I am still in sage mode," he says as he keeps going. As they went through the sea of monsters, no monsters actually attacked them. Though when you are a massive turtle the size of nearly a mountain, monsters tend to fear him. Having an impenetrable shell helped work as a great defense as well. Talia, get into sage mode as I cannot use my sensory skills in this form. I'm mostly focusing on swimming, he says, getting a nod from her. She quickly but carefully went through her katas of drawing nature energy atop him as he stopped as to not disturb her. Her hair quickly turned brown and white as she obtained her sage markings. "Could now direct me as I have no idea where I am going," he says, making her chuckle. "Fine, just keep heading forward, you actually are going the right way, plus the quest is that direction as well," she says as she sits down and focuses on keeping a steady flow of releasing and gathering nature energy. She found it was much easier to draw nature energy while in the sea of monsters. Must be the fleece's work. Naruto nods and keeps on course. As the finally caught up to the quest, Naruto frowned as they were being attacked by Charybdis and Scylla. He frowned. "Talia, stick to the air as my next technique, you can't be on me for," he says, getting a nod from her as she went to flying. She wasn't using an ability of her father as she didn't get that blessing from him. She was using the technique of the Tsuchikage to manipulate wind chakra to fly and float. She learned this from a scroll she got from her grandma for her most recent birthday. Naruto jumped in the air, using his tails as help, and curled into a ball and started rolling fast in midair. Shell tower falling. He yells as his rolling increases greatly and he is sent rocketing into Charybdis. The members of the quest were in shock as a massive talking turtle just crashed into Charybdis. The turtle unrolled and looked at them and they backed away from the edge of the boat. Naruto sighed mentally as he manipulated his voice to only speak in Isabu's. "Leave quickly, as I can only hold off one at a time and Scylla will still try and attack you," he says as they understand and rush to leave. Naruto looks to see Talia out of Scylla's reach and was waiting for him. He worked to hold Charybdis back, but her many tentacles were very annoying. He slammed his hand on the monster's chest and wound up as many of her tentacles as he could and took a deep breath. "Coral palm," he yells, encasing the monster and her tentacles in hardened coral. He looked up just in time to see the boat containing Percy and everyone else explode. He didn't feel any one of their auras die out, so they clearly made it out alive. He looked over to Talia and nodded as he started floating towards the wreck. Talia landed on him. "They all got away. Apparently, they had a cyclops with them," she says as she sits down. Naruto nods, returning his voice to the mixture of his and Isabu's. The cyclops had no negative emotions except for worrying about someone. "They will be fine as they all are alive," he says as he keeps swimming in the direction of the fleece. As they were floating along, they got to a resort that seemed to be being pillaged by pirates. Naruto frowns as he feels Percy and Annabeth float away on a massive boat. "Damn Percy, I just know he caused all of this somehow," he thought as he docked near there and reverted back to himself. Talia frowned as she saw the pirates attacking everything. "We are going to help them, aren't we?" she asks, worried. Naruto nods as he rolls his shoulders. "Of course, we can't let these girls be attacked by them. Incapacitate if you want, but remember these men are pirates from old times, probably trapped here by Circe, though I don't blame her," he says, making Talia nod as she unseals her Kiba blades as he draws Yamato. Talia nods and dashes off to help some girls. Naruto defeats some pirates that were surrounding two girls and crouches down to them and smiles at them. "No need to be afraid, I can help you escape," he says, putting them to some ease. The girls looked exactly alike, both with black hair and dark, almost black, brown eyes. One was much taller and a bit older looking than the other. Most likely the older one. "How can you help us?" The taller one asks as she moves her sister behind her. Naruto summoned a clone, shocking them. Go with my clone and he can take you back to land quickly. Do you have somewhere you want to go? He asks them as he had sent various clones to set markers through various cities across the US. Why yes, I heard of a camp for demigods in San Francisco, the taller one says. Naruto knew she meant the Roman camp. He never got around to visiting it because he felt he shouldn't go there yet. He needed to focus on one camp at a time. He nods to them. I can take you there. What are your names? He asks with a smile. I am Hilla and this is Reina, my sister, and we are both daughters of Bologna. And who are you? She asks as Reina smiles shyly at him. I am Naruto Otsutsuki, child of Chaos and champion of Vesta, he says, using Hestia's Roman name as the Greeks and Romans were not meant to meet each other. Luckily Chaos was chaos in either pantheon. The girls stared at him in shock and tried to bow, but he stopped them. Please don't do that, I am not one to be bowed to. Now go with my clone and he will take you to the camp or as close as I can go as I don't wish to go there yet and may you both be happy, he says with a smile as they walk off and flash away. He gets the memory of various clones he sent out and saw that all the girls who had worked here had been taken to safety. He returned to the dock to see Talia waiting for him. Thanks for sending clones to flash them away, made everything much easier, she says with a smile. She was still in sage mode, as was he, as they both noticed it was incredibly easy to do so in the sea of monsters. Naruto nodded and proceeded to turn back into his three-tailed transformation. Let's go, we need to catch up to them. Hopefully I can absorb some of the fleece's powers before they leave with it, he says as Talia nods and jumps back onto him. He swims faster as Talia told him she felt their auras on the island where the fleece was. They made it there shortly after and he reverted back to normal and made it onto land. We need to be silent as we don't want anyone to discover us, he says as he unseals Yamato again. Since he had unlocked the majority of the Sharingan, he didn't need to use Tenno as much. Koto Amatsukami was something he stayed away from as controlling people was not his thing. Talia nodded as they leapt from tree to tree silently. They arrived at the clearing where the fleece was hanging from a tree. Everything in the clearing was thriving and so full of nature energy. Talia was about to jump down until Naruto stopped her. What's wrong? She asks as her father stared down at the sheep. Once she got a better look she shivered. The sheep were devouring meat like piranhas. Naruto took a deep breath and summoned the mist and cast a white sleep genjutsu on the sheep, making them all pass out for now. He jumped down and drew Yamato and touched it to the fleece. Pretapath, he thinks as Yamato draws in the fleece's abilities. Yamato could store energy and use it later or infuse it into things. Right now, he was making Yamato steal about 50% of the fleece's power to use later. He'd give himself 25% and Talia 25% as well. Even at a quarter power it would increase the speed to draw in nature energy tremendously. Right as he got done, he heard a beast roar and yell something about nobody. He looked to Talia. Let's disappear until they leave. We got what we needed, but I want to stick around a little bit more, he says as Talia nods and they body flicker away. Once Percy and his group had ran off and left, Naruto appeared behind the blind Cyclops Polyphemus with Yamato drawn. He sheathed the blade and the Cyclops burst into golden dust. He runs his hands through the signs and slams his hands down, summoning wolf contract. He calls out, summoning 5 large wolves. What do you need, Naruto? One wolf asks as they look around. I need you to rid this island of any sheep. They are carnivorous and I kinda want to set something up on this island as even without the fleece it is so pure, he says as they nod. So, we get to eat? One of the younger wolves asks. The alpha of the pack, he summons, smiles and nods. Yes, it's a buffet. He yells as he runs off, the others not far behind. Naruto chuckles and turns to Talia. Just let me set up a marker and we can leave. Do you want to leave my Isabu or Hiraishin? He asks as he sets up tags in various places, both security and Hiraishin seals. Talia smiles. I kinda like sailing if it isn't too much trouble, she says, a bit nervous. He chuckles and ruffles her hair. It is no problem, frankly it helps me as the more I use my beast transformations the more I get used to it and possibly helps me with the next, he says as they walk towards the shore. The alpha walks up with a content look on his face. They are all gone, no problems from them. Just call us back if you need any help, Naruto, he says, getting a nod from Naruto before they dispel. He takes a deep breath and returns to his Isobu form. Hold on tight, I want to get out of here fast as I fear with the fleece your clone might be taken out soon, and before that happens, I have much to plan, he says, making Taliah frown but nod. She sits behind his head under his shell so water won't spray on her. He quickly speeds off in the water and quickly whizzes past Charybdis and Scylla. Once out of the sea of monsters he sees a confrontation between Percy and the Ethan boy. He stayed back as he wanted to see how it went. Percy handled himself nicely, causing Ethan to retreat. Naruto sighed as Percy and Co finally left. He walks onto shore with Taliah behind him. Let's get home as I fear things will get hectic very quickly, he says as Taliah nods and frowns. She wanted to go back to see her friends but didn't want Zeus to do anything to her again. She knew Zeus would be enraged at her dad for him saving her and keeping it secret, but she was glad he did it. He gave her happiness, love and help with so many things. But most of all he gave her a family. She didn't want that to disappear, but she knew he would never leave her. She just crossed her fingers and wished that the upcoming days wouldn't be too bad. Chapter 7. Zeus was watching the scene with a bit of worry. Yes, the fleece would save his daughter, but what would she think of him? Would she really hate him for trapping her to get away from punishment? He would have to watch and see. Unbeknownst to him, most of the other gods were watching the scene play out. It was the night after the fleece was placed on Taliah's tree, and they could feel the power of the fleece at work. Seconds later on the screen his daughter could be seen emerging from the tree. Percy looked to her. Who are you? He asks, confused why a normal-looking girl came from the tree. I am Taliah Grace, child of Zeus, she says, before going to a cloud of smoke. Everyone was confused and shocked. Everyone except the ones who knew of it beforehand and Zeus, who was fuming in anger as he had seen someone who did something similar, whenever a clone of his was destroyed. Naruto Otsutsuki. Zeus yells in rage. The damn demigod saved his daughter and had the nerve not to tell him. Ancient rules be damned, chaos be damned, he was taking his anger out on the boy. Naruto sighed as he had heard Zeus yell his name from camp but warped to Olympus as he felt if he didn't then Zeus would take his anger out on whatever was closest until the crybaby king found him. He looked at Zeus, so finally figured it out, eh? He asks as he unseals Yamato and straps it to his waist. You pitiful mortal, stole my daughter. You saved her and you dared not to tell me. He yells as his bolt intensifies in his hand and the winds pick up. Naruto summoned his eyes and glares at Zeus. You lost the right to call her your daughter the second you trapped her in the tree to save your pitiful ass. I saved her and I gave her everything she needed. I protected her, I gave her love, family, and the ability to protect herself. You fucking trapped her in a tree to save your own ass from being punished. He yells, erupting into his cloak mode. You are not her father anymore. I am. He yells, summoning the truth-seeking orbs. Zeus was absolutely red in anger. This mortal dared to yell at him and disrespect him. He raised his bolt and fired at him. Naruto smirked and drew Yamato, absorbing the bolt with his Pretapath. You just made a bad move, Zeus, he says as Yamato blows and his eyes start to spin. In a quick burst of speed, he appeared in front of Zeus and slammed a Susanoo fist into the god's jaw, sending him crashing through his throne, numerous columns and numerous walls. He fades the arm away and started to walk through the rubble to see numerous other gods and Hestia watching him. Hera frowned. She knew her husband broke ancient laws and he'd be punished again, and she also knew no one else could get involved. Please don't hurt him too much, Naruto, Hestia said with an understanding look in her eyes. She knew her fiancé was not a violent man in any sense of the word unless you threatened someone close to him, and then he'd do anything in his power to make sure that threat never reached his precious people. Naruto nodded as he continued to walk through the rubble. Zeus seconds later blasted himself out of the rubble and dashed towards him. Zeus attacked in a fury of swipes and blasts with his bolt. He expected more of the king of gods, but he was being overcome with his rage. Naruto quickly dodged and landed a strong palm thrust with a Susanoo arm, sending the god skidding backwards. Zeus, you expect Talia to accept you as her father when you trapped her for no reason. Trapped her in a dark void like hell that she still has nightmares of. He yells, kicking the man through a few more pillars. You trapped in there so you wouldn't be scolded. You are a child and a hypocrite, he says as the god spits out Inchur. How dare you talk to me like this? I am your king. I am the god of justice. He yells only to be silenced by a skeleton arm grabbing him and slamming him into the ground. You don't deserve that title. You nearly blasted Percy when he was found out when you broke the pact first. Then you yell about being the god of justice when you wanted to punish me for retrieving your bolt and fighting Ares. When he broke ancient laws just like you are, though he was at least under control of someone. Remember, you attacked first, O King of Justice, he says, making Zeus yell before charging at him again. Naruto was getting tired of this. He seriously expected more from Zeus. He wanted to end this quickly. He could either go for a Raisin Shuriken or a Bijuu outside of beast mode. He quickly gathered nature energy, feeding off Yamato as it still held the fleece's ability to draw it in, even if it was lesser since it wasn't in living material such as fabric or cloth. He slammed his foot on the ground with style, nativity of a world of trees, he yells as massive tress ensnares Zeus. Zeus struggled to get free to find his energy being drained. Nature is very powerful force, Zeus, peaceful when treated correctly but vicious when harmed, he says as he creates a Raisin Shuriken. Since Zeus had control over wind and lightning, he was going with lava since it was the only one he could think would do a lot of damage to him. Zeus paled at the spiraling orb of what looked to be lava. You can't do this. I am your king. He yells, struggling harder to free himself. Oh, don't worry, this won't kill you. Put you in a coma, quite possibly, but not kill you, he says as a clone flashes to him with an angry-looking Talia, but the anger wasn't directed towards him. She was glaring at Zeus. Talia, why are you here? It is dangerous, he says, motioning to the lava orb in his hand. She nods. I know, Dad, but I need to say this to him, she says in a serious tone. He nods and takes a step back as she walks towards the trapped Zeus. I hate you, she says, looking him dead in the eyes. You trapped me in limbo just to save your ass. If Dad hadn't saved me, who knows how I'd turn out. He gave me a life and so much more. I will never call you Dad, I will never bow to you, and I will never use your powers again. I renounce my lineage to you, she says as she punches him hard in the face, breaking his nose. She stormed away and walked behind her father, and, when she says father, she will always mean Naruto. Zeus will either be asshole or just Zeus. Maybe another insult. You can finish this now, she says as she cries a little bit. He nods and looks to Zeus. You think you are so perfect, Zeus, but you are a terrible king. You are quick to kill and never listen to any proof so blatantly in front of you. You need to open your eyes and curb that arrogance and paranoia of yours. He raises the Raisin Shuriken above his head. May you have time to think as you sleep, but first he stares into Zeus's eyes, causing the Sharingan to appear on them. Zeus calms down and speaks out in a monotone voice. I, Zeus, swear on the river Styx not to get any kind of revenge towards Naruto or Talia for defeating me in battle. Thunder booms in the background, solidifying the vow. Good, now let's end this. Lava style, Raisin Shuriken. He yells, throwing it straight at Zeus, resulting in a massive dome of lava to swirl around him. You could hear the god's screams as he was shot out of the dome and was embedded into the wall. He was heavily burnt and cut up like crazy. His skin was charred black with golden blood pouring from it. His master bolt was the only non-damaged thing left, but it was red hot. He turned around to see Talia, crying silently. He holds her close and rubs her back. You are not his daughter, he won't bother you anymore, he says as the other gods start walking in. Ares, who was still somewhat recuperating, shuddered at the condition of his father. He felt bad for his father, seemed he got off easy. At least he was only exploded and not burnt with lava. Apollo, stabilize Zeus, he says as he walks to Naruto, who stares at him, still in his cloaked mode. Leave me alone, Ares, you can't try and get revenge as he started this without me doing anything. He broke ancient laws, he says, moving Talia behind him. Aries nodded. I know, I just want to thank you for getting me out of you-know-who's control. I am not a fan of it and I admire your strength, kid, he says, shocking Naruto greatly. Naruto felt no negative emotions as he nodded, thank you, Aries. I would love to spar against you when you are under your own control, he said as Aries nodded and walked away. Aries had no beef with the son of chaos. He was a beast in battle and a great warrior. Hera frowned as she saw her husband. You didn't have to go that far. She yelled, slightly annoyed. He looked to her. Trust me, I could have done worse. The Bijuu I hit Aries with was at 1/6 power, as I haven't made one of those in years. I could have fired a full-powered one at him instead, he said, staring her in the eyes. Poseidon bangs his trident on the ground. Enough fighting for one day. He looks to Apollo. Get my brother to your temple to heal. Athena, contact whoever normally fixes Olympus to fix this damage and everyone get back to the thrones, he says in a commanding tone, getting them to follow his orders. He looks to Naruto and sighs. I know he started this all and I am very sorry for that, but you are needed. It won't be much, he says, getting a nod from Naruto. He summoned a clone and laid a kiss on his daughter's forehead. Go with the clone and wait in the house with it until I go. Keep Zetsu with you and I will be home soon, he says, getting a nod and a hug from her. Be safe, Dad, she says, before walking off and flashing away with the clone. He smiles as he walks through the rubble, easing out of his cloaked mode and sealing up his sword. He made it to the throne room to see the gods all sitting down, waiting for him. He sighed and made it to the center. So, what do you all want, my side of it? He asks as he turns his eyes off. Poseidon nods. We want to know how long you have been raising Talia and where have the two of you been? He asks as he rubs his temples. He wasn't angry at Naruto, frankly he was glad he looked after the girl. I have watched over her for nearly 3 years. I helped her get over her fatal flaw and I will not reveal the whereabouts of my house as it is to be Talia's safe zone, he says as they nod, understanding it. Since she may not be Zeus's daughter, she was still born of eldest god, so she will be needed at camp in case she is the child of prophecy, Poseidon says with a frown. Naruto shakes his head. She will visit camp and whatnot, but she has expressed that she will not be the child of prophecy. She is leaving that to Percy and will help him as needed, he says as Hera clears her throat. I don't mean to sound like my husband here, but don't you all think this demigod is too dangerous? He beat Zeus, the supposed strongest of us, like it was nothing, she says, getting the interest of a few. The boy is a powerful warrior, but he isn't bloodthirsty. He fights to protect and defend, Ares says, surprising everyone. What? I can't like the kid? He asks confused. Just because I like war doesn't mean I don't like a good clean warrior. Poseidon nods. He is powerful, but his mother is chaos. He wouldn't dare do that and I trust him fully, he says as he smiles. This gets nods from everyone. Now can I leave? I have a distraught daughter to care for, he says, fiddling with a marker. Poseidon nods. Thank you, Naruto, you may leave, he says as the boy flashes away. Now he just had to figure out what to do while Zeus was recuperating and how to punish him for breaking ancient laws. Oregon. The second he got there, Talia hugged him tightly, still crying. Should Talia, everything is okay. I promised I'd never leave you and I never break my promises, he says, laying a kiss atop her head. She nods and keeps hugging him, but her tears stopped. So I'm guessing we have to stay in camp for some time? She asks, curious. He nods yes, but I can set up a gateway with Zetsu and my seals to link Hestia's cabin with your room here if you want, he said, getting a smile from her. He kissed her forehead again, which made her smile happily. I love you, Dad, she says, hugging him again. I love you too, Talia. Now let's get everything set up before we leave for the incoming headache, he says, getting a chuckle from her. They spent the next few hours setting up the seals in her room and on her door as well as packing some of his essentials. Talia, bring your trench coat over here, I need to create the mini fleece for you, he says, drawing Yamato as he touches the blade to the scarf Talia knit for him a couple years. He flows half of the fleece's power into it and the instant after the scarf gets a golden glow and becomes a bit longer. He puts it around his neck and smiles at Talia. Talia looks excited as he touches Yamato to the Nemean lioness pelt. So this will act like the fleece did? It'll draw in nature energy to it and heal me? she asks as her trench coat glows a bit. Yes, it'll be at 25% of the fleece's original power, but even at that we will be able to reach Sage Mode much faster, but remember to be careful, only draw on what you need, okay? He says as he ruffles her hair. She nods and for once doesn't swat it away. She looks up to him. When we get to camp, will you help me explain everything to Annabeth, Luke and Grover? She asks nervously. He takes his hand off her and smiles. Of course, they will understand. It was either tell them and get possibly stuck in the tree again and possibly get them in trouble, or hide it until your clone came out, he said, easing her worries a little. She nods and holds onto his arm. Ready? She asks nervously. He nods and holds her hand and flashes away to camp. Camp Half-Blood. Camp was in an uproar of confusion. 1 second Talia was out and then the next she disappeared in a cloud of smoke. Then they could hear thunder and see lighting going like crazy until all of a sudden it just stopped. Dionysus returned and just sighed before an orange flash lightened up the area. This time it was Naruto with an older-looking Talia. He clears his throat, getting everyone's attention. Okay, I know everyone is confused at the events that happened earlier, but I can help explain everything, he says as they gather around. This here is Kaguya Otsutsuki, my adopted daughter and the ex-child of Zeus. Due to certain circumstances, she renounced her relation to him, he said, getting confused mumbles from everyone. Now I need Grover, Luke and Annabeth to follow us to Hestia cabin, he says as Hestia's symbol appeared over Talia's head. The 3 kids step forward and follow him as Talia smiles at them nervously. He opens Hestia's cabin doors and lets them in, keeping others from entering. Percy frowned. Can I come in as well? He asks. Naruto shakes his head. This is something personal between Talia and those 3, he says, making Percy frown as he saw Annabeth blushing as she looked at Talia. Percy grumbled and walked away as Chiron ushered the campers back to their cabins as Naruto closed the door behind him. He sighed and turned to the kids. Annabeth was hugging Talia tightly and crying as Luke as rubbing Talia's back. Grover was just smiling at it all. Look, I've had a rough day. I'd rather be at home relaxing with my fiancée, but now I need to explain everything, so don't interrupt me, he says as they sit down and look towards him. Why did the Talia that came out of the tree look so different than this one? Annabeth asks. The tree version looks like she did back when they traveled, but this one was so different. Longer hair, different clothes, and the aura of someone confident and happy. I am getting to that, he says as he sits down in front of them. When I first got here, I saved you all from Hades' minions. I was enraged at Zeus for trapping Talia for no reason. Now my eyes have certain abilities that some of you have seen, he says, turning on his eyes to show them. Luke had seen the powers firsthand when he was pulled into that pocket dimension. Annabeth and Grover had seen those powers while on the quest a couple years ago. I decided to screw over Zeus and save her. Using my eyes, I pulled her from the tree and replaced her with a clone, he says, patting her hand. Over the years I trained her and looked out for her, even adopted her, hence the Otsutsuki name, and Hestia claiming her since I am Hestia's champion, he explains as Annabeth looks like she is about to ask a question. Wait until he's done, Annabeth, Talia said with a smile, making the blonde blush a bit and nod. Naruto saw this and chuckled. I know some of you are wondering why she didn't tell you all, and that is because I told her not to, he says, getting confused looks from everyone. If you all knew she was out, it might get out to some gods that voted to go along with her being trapped in a tree. You would be in danger and she might as well. Do not think she forgot about you all, she was worried about you all the entire time, he says, getting nods from them. I understand the worry about telling us, and I am just glad she is back, Luke says as he rubs her shoulder. Grover nods. Yeah, she's back and Zeus won't bother anymore. Right? He asks Naruto. Naruto nods. Yes, I dealt with Zeus after he found out I put a clone in there. He got angry and we actually fought, he says, rubbing the back of his head. Annabeth was speechless, which was rare for her. Why you beat Zeus? She asks, confused. He nods. Yeah, though he attacked me first with no reason other than he was annoyed, so nothing will happen. I made sure of it, he says as he stands up. Now it is very late and you need to go to bed. We can talk more and whatnot in the morning, he says as Annabeth grumbles. Luke chuckled as he helped get everyone out. Before leaving he turned to Naruto and nodded. "Thank you for saving her and me," he said before walking off. Naruto smiled as he went back inside to see Taliah smiling softly. "I will get your doorway set up tomorrow. Until then sleep on the bed and I'll take the couch," he says while he ruffles her hair. She nods and hugs him. "Night, Dad." He smiles and hugs her back. "Night, Taliah, sleep well," he says as she lays down. Once she was asleep, he crafted the doorway to Taliah's room. Spacetime ninjutsu might not be his forte, but he could do this easily enough. Once the door was set up he laid on the couch. Just as he closed his eyes, he felt a weight lay atop him. He smiled as he could smell homemade cookies and saw Hestia sitting on top of him. He smiled and stroked her cheek. "Hello there, honey," he says as she smiles and holds his hand. "Hi, I'm sorry I couldn't stay away from you," she says as kisses him softly. He kisses her back and rubs her sides. "I'm sorry for how everything went. I was expecting Zeus to get angry but not actually attack me." "How is everything going on Olympus?" he says as she lays her head on his chest. Poseidon is handling it nicely with Hera helping out, though Hera is a little annoyed at Zeus being that injured, but she understands this way he is getting off lighter than if the fates got to him, she says as she rubs his chest. He nods and kisses the top of your head. "Stay here and sleep. We can worry in the morning," he says as he wraps his arms around her. She giggles and kisses his neck. "Fine, but I have to leave early." "Love you, Naruto," she says as she starts to close her eyes. "Love you too, honey," he says as he drifts off to sleep. Next morning, he was awoken by a kiss on his forehead. He opened his eyes to see Hestia standing over him. He was about to say something when she placed her finger over his mouth. "I have to leave, dear. There is a meeting and I have my duties, but I will see you during dinner." "I love you," she says as she kisses him lovingly. He ran his fingers through her hair and kissed her back. "Love you too, see you tonight," he said as she flashed away. "If you two are going to be all kissy, can you do it not around me?" Taliah says as she stares at him with a flat look. He chuckles. "Kinda difficult when there are no rooms in here yet, but enough bagging on me. Let's get to breakfast," he says as he gets up. Taliah nodded and quickly went to her room to get changed. While she was doing that he changed into less damaged clothes. He now wore black jeans with his sandals and an orange short-sleeved button-up shirt. Wrapped around his waist like a belt was Taliah's scarf, acting as a mini fleece so he could always have it on him. Around his neck was Taliah's skull necklace she gave him, and on his left-hand ring finger was his engagement ring with Taliah's skull ring on his middle finger. Taliah returned wearing the Ninian trench coat. She wore tight blue jeans and a gray t-shirt. Around her neck was Tsunade's necklace and another necklace bearing the Uzumaki swirl that she must have gotten from his mother or grandmother. "Ready?" he asks as he smiles to her. She nods and holds onto his arm, still slightly nervous to be in camp and around her friends again, but at least she had her father with her. He smiles and ruffles her hair before heading out for breakfast. Everyone was staring at them, but he paid them no mind as he led Taliah to Hestia's table. He saw Annabeth looking at them nervously, as if she wanted to join them. He smiled at her and signaled for her to come over. "You can sit with us, Annabeth. Hestia won't mind since you are Taliah's friend," he says, making the blonde girl smile and rush over. He summoned food for them, and after they sacrificed some to the gods, they spent breakfast talking about Taliah's life with him. "Wow, he sounds like a really good father, and he taught you all that?" Annabeth asks, shocked as they eat. Her friend got a father that protected her and made her lose her fatal flaw. Annabeth looks to Naruto nervously. "See, can you maybe train me and help me?" she asks nervously. He looks up from his food and raises an eyebrow. He looks to Taliah, silently asking if he should. She nods and he sighs. "Fine, but you aren't getting chakra right away. I might bless you with it, but we would have to curb that pride of yours first," he says, thinking up a training program. "I also don't know if I have a sword for you since you use a knife." "Only thing short enough would be right Jean no can, and I don't think it'd suit you," he says, making her frown. "Don't worry, Annabeth, I know Dad will figure something out," Taliah says, making Annabeth blush and nod. Naruto noticed that the girl always blushed around Taliah, and he could feel her emotion towards Taliah was always love. It didn't bother him, just made him curious. He nodded. "I just need to look through my scroll. After breakfast go to the arena with Taliah and I will find something for you," he says as he sacrifices the rest of the meal to his fiancée, mother and grandparents. They nod and continue talking as he walks away, heading towards the cabin. He enters Hestia's cabin and unrolls his scroll and goes to his weapon section of it. When he originally packed the scroll, he just grabbed the 7 swords of the mist and some other tools, but apparently Amaterasu added a lot. She put Raijin no Ken, Orochimaru's Kusanagi, and a lot more. All of them infused with celestial bronze, of course. The only blades he could think of giving her was a pair of trench knives similar to Asuma's. They were a bit bigger than his, and they were made of steel and bronze with specks of what seemed to be gold. He noticed ever since he fought Diana, Artemis's Roman form, his weapons seemed to gain some imperial gold. Even his markers gained it. He sighed as he rolled up the scroll, pocketing the trench knives away for later. He exited the cabin and made his way to the arena to begin his training of Annabeth. When he got there, Talia was training with her Kiba blades as Annabeth watched. Other campers also watched her train, and he could feel jealousy rolling off some of them. He sighed as he walked in. He waved for Annabeth to join him. The girl nervously walked over to him. "Now I understand you use knives. I want to see how well you do," he says as he pulls out the trench knives and wields them. "Use your knife to fight me. I need to see how good you are," he says, motioning for her to come at him. She stands nervously, looking over to Talia, who gives her an encouraging nod. She takes a deep breath and draws her knife. She charges him and takes an experimental slash. He blocks it with his knife and goes for a slash, but Annabeth quickly brings her knife down to block and sweep kicks him. He jumps over it easily and kicks the knife out of her hand by coating his foot in earth chakra. The knife flies into the air and he sticks his trench knife to her throat as he catches her knife in between 2 fingers. She frowns, upset that she was defeated so easily. She might not have many useful abilities like other demigods, but she tried to make up for it. Tears threatened to roll out until she felt a hand on her shoulder. She looked up to see Naruto smiling at her. "Good job. I could tell you are pretty good at using your knife, but you need something more versatile, and I think this trench knives will work," he says, handing them to her, confusing her greatly. "You have a good understanding in using a knife. You just need more training and the right tools and you will be a deadly warrior," he says, patting her back. She stared at him confused. "But you defeated me so easily," she says, frowning. He chuckles, "Well, true, but I have fought a lot longer than you and have much more hardened senses as well as more techniques. If I didn't use chakra it would have lasted as long as it would have taken for me to disarm you without it," he says with a smile. Annabeth smiled, understanding his reasoning. She smiled as she felt Talia rub her back. "You did pretty good, Annie. With more training you will be great, especially once you get chakra," she says, making her blush a bit. He chuckled as he ruffled Talia's hair, making her blush, and swat his hand away quickly. "Relax, training won't be too bad and who knows, it'll most likely be fun," he says, making her smile and nod. She was ready to get stronger and maybe overcome that fatal flaw of hers. -1 month later, Book 3 basically starts now. Naruto sighed. Over the few months he had been at camp, the only reprieve he had to the annoying campers was his daughter and fiancé, who showed up every other night and sometimes even stayed till mornings. Annabeth's training went nicely and it seemed that her fatal flaw all but vanished around Talia, and even when Talia wasn't nearby it didn't show up as often as it did in the past. Maybe having Talia out of her tree fixed it for her. Annabeth took to the trench knives greatly. She flowed with them nicely and had the agility to be deadly with them. She had gained Shurka a week or so ago and was a quick learner. She had earth and wind affinity and mastered the basics very quickly. He even gave her tips on coating her blades in chakra as well as the basics on flying swallow style. Talia was also helping her with her wind jutsus and she was making good progress on her own with the earth jutsus. He currently stood in front of Percy, who was being his usual idiot self. Annabeth was holding back Talia, who, lucky for her, no longer had her natural lightning ability but could still generate it with lightning. "Let me get this straight, Percy, because I am training Annabeth, who is my daughter's friend, you think you can order me to train you just because? I understand you want to be strong for your role, but I don't like people demanding things from me and I feel you do your usual idiot behavior with my training," he says, making the boy glare. "Stop calling me an idiot. You gave Annabeth those knives and gave her your weird energy, so why can't I get training from you as well?" he complains. Percy, it is my decision who gets chakra and who doesn't, as well as who I train and who I don't. Don't demand things if others, he says as he walks off to his daughter. He knew the boy had no truly bad intentions, he just had a strong urge to protect others, even if they could defend themselves easier than he could defend them. His idiocy sometimes got to him in a bad way. What if I defeat you in battle, Percy says, shocking the campers. Percy had just challenged someone who defeated Ares and Zeus, if the rumors were correct, to battle. Naruto sighed as his daughter burst out laughing. You really think you can defeat my dad? You saw him fight Ares, and just to let you know that orb he hit him with was 1/4 of the power it should have been, she says, surprising everyone. Percy stares him dead in the eyes. I still challenge him. If I can win, he has to train me. If I lose, I never bring it up again, he says, drawing Riptide. Naruto groans, fine, but I'm only using half power, any more than that and I fear I'd hurt you too bad, he says as he draws Yamato. Percy glares and charges at him. He dodges the fury of slices from Percy easily. The boy's style was full berserker. He activated his eyes and whispered out Shinra Tensei, sending Percy rocketing away, crashing into the wall. Going to have to do better than this, Percy, he says as he draws Yamato. Percy pulls himself from the wall to see Naruto extending his hand, Bansho Tenin. Immediately after muttering those words, Percy is sent flying towards Naruto. Once close enough, he uses the sheath of Yamato and hits the base of Percy's neck, knocking him out immediately. The boy was way too eager. Hopefully this will calm him down some, he says as he sheathes Yamato and seals it away. Everyone was in awe. He had defeated one of their strongest campers with 2 moves and didn't even use his sword, only the sheath. But what else did they expect from the one who has defeated 2 gods? Naruto went over to his daughter. I'm going to rest, he says, waving to them. Taliah smiles as she turns to Annabeth, ready to keep training? She asks, making her friend blush and nod. Taliah had a feeling Annabeth liked her, but she wasn't able to sense emotions like her father, but she was fairly certain. She was nervous to admit her feelings as well, due to the fear her father might not accept her if he found out, as well as not knowing if Annabeth really felt like that. Naruto sighed as he walked to the cabin. He really was getting tired of this camp, more just getting bored, but he knew he had to stay here for Taliah, and because at the moment there was nothing else he could do. He went into his cabin to sleep for a while before dinner. As he laid down, he felt someone lay next to him. He opened his eyes slightly to see Hestia as she cuddled up close to him and stayed in his arms while he slept. She knew he was having an exhausting time at camp due to the kids and the boredom, but he was being a good father and staying for Taliah. In the last month she had become close to the girl, and she actually called her mom when they were alone, which made her cry in happiness. She was happy just to be here for her fiancé and future husband. Next day. Naruto pinched the bridge of his nose. You want us to go pick up some new demigods from a boarding school? He asks Chiron. It wasn't that he was asked to go, he was more annoyed of how they brought the demigods over. He could think of tons of different ways to get them to the camp and explain it to them. Chiron nods yes. You, Percy, Annabeth and Taliah will go help Grover retrieve the 2 demigods and help get them back to camp. Grover says there is a monster after them as well, so be on guard, he says, making Naruto sigh again. Any idea of the monster, or are we going in blind on that aspect, he says as Taliah bounces in excitement to fight something. Chiron sighs. The monster is hidden in human form and has shown no aspects of its true form except for its scent, he says in an apologetic tone. Naruto stands up. Fine, but I'm in charge of this mission, and that means you have to listen to me, Percy. I swear to Kami that if you do something stupid, I am locking you away, he says, staring at the boy dead in the eyes. Percy glares back and grumbles. When do we leave? He says as he summons his scroll to him. Later that day. Naruto groaned as he drove the kids to the boarding school. He drove the black SUV he bought many months ago. He would have got it in orange if they sold it in that color. Percy sat in the back while Taliah and Annabeth in the very back. Green Day was currently playing as he had no other CDs, and Taliah used her damn puppy eyes jutsu on him. He swore his mother taught her that as revenge for him using the reverse harem on her. They were getting close. Get ready everybody, we are pretty close. Once we get inside, we need to try and get the kids alone and away from the group. That means no solo work, and I especially say that to you, Percy. He says, looking at Percy in the rearview mirror. Percy glares. I'm not going to do any of that, so stop saying it every chance you get, he says in an annoyed tone. Talia chuckles, knowing it probably will happen. Don't worry, Dad, we will keep an eye on him, she says, getting a thumbs up from her dad. They eventually made it to the school and pile out. Now I want you all to stay together and keep an eye on the kids, he says as they enter to see Grover. Good, you guys are finally here. Hurry, Dr. Thorne, the monster, and is starting to get antsy, he says as he pulls Percy along as Annabeth and Talia walk in after him. Naruto turns on his eyes and hides them behind a henge as he looks around. His eyes land on the two kids. They look exactly the same, around 13 or so years old, olive-colored skin and dark black hair and dark eyes. From what his eyes could see, they had an aura that reminded him of Hades. He'd have to send a message to Hades about it later. He walked through the dance floor to see Annabeth being bothered by Percy for a dance. Poor boy, if what he could sense from the blonde-haired girl was correct, the girl had a crush on his daughter. Talia was having fun with Grover from what he could see and was joking around with him. Her cloak was sealed away as it would be a blatant sign of her being a demigod. He frowned as he saw the Dr. Thorne, the obvious monster from its aura, go to the kids and usher the kids away. And then he groaned as he saw Percy rush after them. He was going to strangle that kid. He sent a signal to Talia and motioned for the door. She got Annabeth and Grover's attention as they left the dance. They left the building to see Percy facing off against the Manticore with the two demigods under the beast's paw. Annabeth and Talia use long-range jutsus to hold its attention. As I go and back off the idiot, he orders, getting nods from the girls. He takes a deep breath and transforms into Matatabi and pounces on the Manticore. The beast never saw him coming as it roars in pain from his form's flames as it backs away, firing off needles. He slashes away 3 needles it fired at Percy and glared at Percy, making the boy pale. He was about to say something, but he didn't want to hear it. His yellow eye turns to the Shinjuzai Kamui, he said, making Percy disappear in a swirl. He did warn the kid. He turned his attention to the beast as it was hit with black lightning and a blade of wind. He used his claws to send the beast away from the kids as he summons a clone to take them to safety. He quickly grabs the kids and dashes back just as a volley of silver arrows hit it. Artemis? He thinks as he looks back to see the hunters. Artemis sends him a subtle nod as she looks in his eyes. He nods and transforms back into his normal form and walks away from the Manticore. Talia glared at the hunters with a frown. Relax, Talia, you could say Artemis and I got over our differences and she's not trying to kill me anymore, he says, making her frown more but nod. The Manticore roars, goddess, you can't interfere with me. Ancient rules forbid it. He yells as he fires needles at them only for them to disappear in a soundless swirl of air, confusing him. Artemis sends Naruto a thankful nod. I am the goddess of the hunt and you are a beast, therefore in my domain. Fire at will, Zoe, she says, getting a nod from her lieutenant as she orders them to fire. She walks over to the group and looks at Naruto. Definitely improving your skills, I see, and you gave another child that energy of yours, she says as she looks over the child of Athena. Another girl, I see. If I didn't know better, I'd think you were creating your own group of women fighters, she says, making him chuckle. Now that is your thing. I am just helping my daughter's friends out, he says as he ruffles Talia's hair, making her swat it away. Thank you for helping my hunters and leaving the target for them, she says as she looks around. Where is the son of Poseidon? She asks, confused. He chuckles. Oh, he's just in time out in my pocket dimension for insubordination. I warned him I'd lock him up if he did something stupid. He can stay there until we return to camp, he says, making the goddess laugh. Well, that is a good punishment. Now I am guessing you all are tired. I would like to invite you all to stay at my camp until we can get you all a ride back to camp, she says as she motions for them to follow. He sends a clone to seal up his car as he follows Artemis with the others not far behind. Grover was a little worried for Percy, but Talia assured him he'd be safe. The two twins were being carried by clones as they had lost consciousness shortly after the fight began. As Naruto walked behind Artemis, numerous hunters were glaring at him heavily. He sighed as they entered the center of her camp. Milady, why is he here? Zoe yells angered and confused. Artemis sighed. We have patched things up. I realized I was acting pig-headed and he helped me. He is under my protection, so no one will harm him or his group, she says in a chilling tone, getting nods from the hunters. She smiles and turns to them. Please feel free to explain to the twins when they wake up their situation and send the female to my tent. When she comes over you may come as well, Naruto, she says as she walks away. He was surprised at how much Artemis had changed, but was worried about what the hunters would do. Even if their mistress ordered them didn't mean they would fully listen. He turned to Talia and Grover. Tell me when they wake and explain everything to them. I doubt I'd be good at it, he says as he sits against a tent as they nod and head inside. He sighed as he saw hunters glaring at him as they go about their work. An hour or later his daughter comes out. They woke up and the girl doesn't believe us though, she is ready to go with you, she says as he nods and pats her head. He walks inside to see the boy talking excited with Grover as Annabeth tried to calm down the female twin. Relax girl, she speaks the truth, he says, getting her attention. Who are you? And no, she isn't. This is crazy talk, she says, shaking her head. I am Naruto Otsutsuki, child of chaos and champion of Hestia, and I think I know who your father is. May I have your name, he asks as he looks her over with his Shinju eyes, shocking her a bit. I am Bianca D'Angelo, and my brother Nico is over there. What the hell is going on? She asks, a bit scared. Naruto sighs and pats her head. Relax, just follow me and I will explain everything better. I will keep you safe, he says as she at him and nods slowly. He smiles and leads her out the tent. Talia, stay here and keep everything calm as I don't feel like breaking up any fights, he says with a groan. Talia pouts but nods before sitting next to Annabeth. He smiles as he leads Bianca to Artemis's tent. Come in, I can feel you two outside, he hears Artemis say as they enter. She is sitting in a chair with Zoe next to her, who is scowling at him with rage in her eyes. He nods to Artemis as they sit down. I trust they explained everything to you, Artemis says as she looks to the girl. Bianca nods, but it can't be true, can it? Me being the daughter of a god is just crazy. Gods don't exist, she says, shaking her head. Artemis, they exist as one is in front of you, she says, making the girl pale as Artemis aged herself slightly from her usual 13-year-old form. Sorry, I didn't know, she says, worried that she might be struck down with lightning. Artemis waves it off. You had no way of knowing. Now I believe they told you about the camp, but there is another choice, she says, getting the girl's attention. You can join my hunters, be immortal, be free and learn to live for yourself. The only drawback is you have to abstain from the company of men and cannot visit your brother, she says as she stared in the young demigod's eyes. Bianca thought it over deeply for some time. She could be free, but she'd have to leave her brother. Sure, he was a goof sometimes, but he looked out for her and was always there for her. She sighs and shakes her head. I can't leave my brother, he wouldn't do that to me and I'm not doing that to him, she says, looking the goddess in the eyes. Artemis frowned but was glad the girl valued family. I respect your choice now. If you could return to the tent as Naruto and I have a lot to talk about, she says, getting the girl to leave. Naruto smiled at Artemis. What may I help you with, Artemis? He asks as he sits down. Artemis looked to Zoe. Please leave, Zoe, this is something personal, she says, shocking her lieutenant, but after a slight glare Zoe leaves. I want to ask you a favor, she says, shocking Naruto. From his memories, Artemis never asked any males for any favors. Sure, what do you need help with? He asks. He wasn't going to turn it down. Artemis could be a good ally for the future, even if they had butted heads in the past. I need you to look after my hunters while I am gone. I fear something ancient is free and I need to hunt it down. My hunters can look after themselves, but if something were to happen while I was hunting the beast, I fear they would run rampant to find me. I ask for a marker so I can tell them that if anything were to happen to me, they could summon a strong warrior to lead them in my stead, she says nervously. She wasn't used to asking males for favors and she felt somewhat bad for lying to her hunters, but felt it was needed. She had a dark feeling about this hunt. He nods and hands her 2 markers, of course, but keep one yourself. If you feel the need, call for me, he said, staring into her eyes with a serious look on his face. She nods and stands up. I will keep it in mind. Now head back to your tent. I will have a hunter call for you when the ride for camp shows up, she says as he stands and heads for the door. He nods and leaves the tent to see numerous hunters glaring at him even harsher. He sighs and just leaves for his tent. Hopefully Zoe wouldn't call for him, as he feared they wouldn't dare listen to him. Chapter 8. Naruto stood next to his daughter and her friends as they chatted with the twins that he knew for certain were Hades' kids after he sent a message to him via Hestia. The god asked for him to look after them and explained the situation with them. He definitely gave him credit for using the Lotus Casino to keep them frozen in time, essentially, keeping his oath intact and still having children. The hunters were still behind him glaring daggers at him, but he bared them no mind. Artemis stood next to him. My brother is so lazy in the wintertime, I swear, she said with a sigh. Can't you warp everyone to camp? She asks, confused. She had seen him using his warping technique a few times, but she wasn't sure. He shakes his head. Largest groups are a no-go. Too many energies to match and warp, and I can't store them in my pocket dimension as I have an angry son of Poseidon in there, and it's not the friendliest area, he said with a chuckle as Artemis nodded in understanding. Is he there all alone? She asks, wondering if he was destroying the place as much as he could. Nazetsu is there and he is keeping him calm. Though I doubt he could damage it very much, he said as the sun started to peek over the horizon. Avert your eyes until he lands, she calls out as everyone averts their eyes except Naruto, as his eyes weren't affected by it and he was curious as to how it went. He could see a Maserati spider hovering down and landing as the light died down. Seconds later, a man that looked like an older, non-scarred Luke came out wearing khakis and a white button-up. Little sis. What can I do you for? He says as Artemis glares at him. Shut up, brother. I am older than you. I helped mother birth you, for goodness sake. She yells, pulling his ear down hard. Fine. Fine. Just let go. He yells in pain as she lets go and he clenches his ear in pain. What do you need? He says with a sigh as he looks around. Artemis sighs. I need transport to camp for my hunters and Naruto's groups, she says as Naruto nods to Apollo but keeps on guard. He didn't want the sun god to flirt with his daughter. Apollo smiles and nods. Sure thing, sis. Just have to change my ride, he says as he clicks his car key remote, changing the sports car to a shuttle bus. Now brother, do not flirt with my hunters, do not look at them and don't be yourself, Artemis says with a glare as Apollo waves it off and nods before looking at the group. Talia Grace, you caused a lot of trouble up in Olympus, he says looking her over, though I'm glad you didn't really become a tree, such a shame when a pretty girl becomes a tree, he says, making Talia glare and look away. She knew he voted to turn her to a tree. The only ones who didn't were Demeter, Hermes, Poseidon and Athena. Annabeth rubbed her friend's back and sent her a smile that she returned and stayed close to her as Apollo stares down Naruto. Naruto shows no sign of being intimidated, considering how he defeated Zeus like it was nothing. Apollo instinctively shuddered when Naruto looked him in the eye with his Shinju eyes. Apollo walked away, deciding not to say anything, making Artemis chuckle. She turned to Zoe. Watch after the hunters and remember, use that knife to summon a great warrior if you are in need. She will help you, I made sure of it, she says, sending a pleading look to Naruto silently. He chuckled and gave her an OK symbol. He didn't mind having to henge to a girl if Zoe summoned him. He sighed as he leaned against the bus waiting for everyone to get on. Also, do not attack Naruto. I know you don't like him, but we have made peace and he is legion stronger than you all or even me, she says, making Zoe nod and grumble. I will be gone for a while as I have to hunt this beast, but it shouldn't be too difficult, she says, getting a nod from them as she heads off into the forest. The hunters glare as they pass him and Zoe glares most of all. He chuckles and smiles as the twins, Grover, Annabeth and Talia all get on. Annabeth and Talia sit together as do the twins as Grover tries to sit as close to the hunters as he can. Naruto sighs and sits behind his daughter and leans against the wall. Apollo gets on and smiles while the Apollo Express is about to take off. Any volunteers for driving? He says with a mischievous smirk. Nico raises his hand, making Apollo frown. Too young. He looks to Grover, who is also raising his hand. Too furry as well. He frowns, looking around until he looks to Talia, daughter of Zeus. Seems fitting, he said, until he felt a massive killing intent coming from her. I am not that bastard's kid. My dad is sitting behind me, she says as her chakra flares until she feels her father's hand on her back. Calm down, Talia, not many gods know of your disowning of him. Apollo, I think it is best if you just drive. We need to get back to camp, plus the sooner we get back the sooner Percy can get out of my pocket dimension, he said, making the sun god nod and rush to his seat. Naruto sighs and decides to take a small nap as they chariot flew. Annabeth smiled at Talia and was confused when she didn't start freaking out. Did you get over of your fear of heights? She asks, making Talia chuckle. Yeah, Dad and some people I trained under helped me get over it, though mostly my dad, she says, smiling back to her sleeping dad. Annabeth smiles and nods. I'm glad you have him. He has changed you and made you better, she says with a smile as she leans on her crush and they enjoy the ride. Camp. They land in camp and Naruto smiles. Well, time for the idiot to get out of his timeout, he says, extending his hand and activating his eyes. Kamui, he whispers out as a portal appears as Percy and a black blob appear from it. Apollo, who stuck around a little longer, was confused of this, as were the hunters. Percy stands up and glares at Naruto. The hell was all that? You fucking put me in that weird place with that scary thing. He yells, pointing to the black blob that stands up and reveals two glowing eyes and a smile of sharp teeth. Naruto glares back. I warned you many times that if you did anything stupid, I would lock you up, and guess what you did? You went straight up and fought a manticore. Without any backup and endangered Nico and Bianca's life. You are lucky I saw you head out so I could back you up. He yells, glaring. And hey! Don't talk shit about my brother. He says as Zetsu nods. Not kind of you, young child, he says as he slithers into Naruto's sleeve. You owe me a lot of meat for that, Naruto, he says as he closes his eyes in the sleeve to hide himself. Naruto nods. I know, I'll do it later. Now Percy, you have no reason to be pissed, but I have every reason, as you were being your usual idiot self. He yells as Chiron trots up. Please Naruto, cut the boy some slack, he says, nervous as Naruto glared at him. No. He's been babied too much. His first quest, he nearly crashes a bus full of mortals. Then, from what I hear, he forcefully tagged along and hijacked a quest, releasing pirates and destroying a safe haven for girls. If he doesn't learn, he will just get more stupid. He yells, hiding the fact that he was there for the second quest to clean up after him. He groans as he storms off. I'll be in the cabin, he says as he leaves. Talia sighs, lucky he let you out. He hates people who put others in danger, and that realm isn't that bad. Sure, it's barren, but it's good for training, and Zetsu is nice once you get to know him, she says as she walks after her father. Annabeth frowns at Percy and shakes her head as she follows after as well. Since she had gotten close to Talia, she was allowed in Hestia cabin and Talia's room, which she was glad she was able to have. Plus, she was able to have sleepovers as long as it was only once a week. Percy frowned and glared at Naruto's retreating form. Chiron cleared his throat. I suspect the hunters will be staying in Artemis's cabin? He asks as Apollo drives off. Zoe nods. Yes, we will be ready for capture the flag as well. Is that man going to be a part of it? She asks as she was curious of his abilities. From the fight with her mistress some years ago, she knew he had power over black flames and some illusionary technique, as well as cloning himself. From the fight with the manticore, she saw he could become a massive flaming cat with two tails. And just now she saw he could pull others into a pocket dimension. She wanted to test herself against him, even if he could defeat Zeus. Chiron sighed. No, he claims it is worthless as it teaches the heroes that war is a game, but I believe Talia, his daughter, might be taking part in it, and he has trained her for 4 years or so, he says, making Zoe frown but nod. We will be in our cabin until lunch, as some hunters are still tired, she says as she walks over, Grover following not far behind. Chiron smiles at the two twins. Well, how about I show you to the big house? You can come too, Percy, he says as he ushers them away. Naruto. He sighed as he sat in his chair with Annabeth and Talia chatting on the couch. I swear that boy really does have seaweed for a brain. He only does stupid things every time he acts, he says as he drinks some tea that he conjured up. Talia nods yes, and this last act nearly endangered the two twins and himself. If I were you, Dad, I would have just left him in Kamui until Zetsu said he calmed down, she says as Annabeth nods. He sighs again. It's still late, so sleep till lunch. You all need it, especially if you both are fighting in Capture the Flag, and don't worry, you can also sleep here tonight as well, Annabeth, he says as they smile and head off, but not before Talia kisses him on the cheek. He smiles as they go to the room to sleep as he feels a presence next to him and holds it close to him. He smiled at his fiancée Hestia and kisses her cheek. I have had the worst day, honey, he says as she smiles and strokes his cheek. I know, I watched, which is why I am here. I thought I could help, she said as she sat his lap and kissed him lovingly. He always melted at her kisses. They tasted like honey and a mixture of brown sugar that he quickly got addicted to. Hestia was strangely dominant when kissing and always seemed to initiate any deeper kiss. She smiled and pulled away, looking into his eyes. Naruto, I know this isn't the best time to bring it up, but I think I found a way to get out of my deal with Styx so we can be together physically, she says as she blushes dark at the thought of being with her fiancé. He frowned and looked at her before smiling. Whatever it is, I will do it. Especially when it means I can be with the woman I love, he says as he kisses her cheek. Hestia smiles warmly. You just need to fight Pallas, Styx's husband, in honorable combat. We can go anytime, so it is up to you, she says as she kisses him softly before leading him to the bed to rest at. He smiled and held Hestia close in his arms as he slept with the woman he loved. Lunchtime. He awoke to the sound of the horn and sighed as he noticed Hestia was gone, but smiled at her note she left. Talia and Annabeth come out and smile as he gets up. What are you going to do, Dad? She asks as Zetsu slides out of his sleeve. I am going to train and maybe go to my pocket dimension. Zetsu will stay with you too and see over your training, he says as he straps on his scroll with his scarf around his neck and heads out. Talia and Annabeth follow after and head to the table as he heads to the forest. He had a special place for meditation and just to get away from the annoying camp. He set up barrier and illusion tags around an empty clearing so no one would disturb him. He walked through the barrier to smile at the massive cherry blossom tree. It was the same one he made when he first fought the Nemean lioness and found it was a great place to train, drawing nature energy with the scarf, as if he drew too much too quickly the tree would absorb the extra energy. Also, since it was abandoned and hidden from others, he could practice some other techniques, like elements that were quite destructive or his beast transformations. He could use most secondary elements and slowly making progress on tertiary elements like dust or crystal. He was also up to 5 tails on his transformation, and he could draw out each of the Bijuu's powers, like Shikaka's magnet release or Matatabi's blue flames, and even Ryuki's tentacles for shielding against lightning. He still missed the Bijuu, but he knew that the sage wasn't as good as he was made out to be. He sighed and sat under the tree, looking up at its petals, wondering how everyone was doing back in the elemental nations. Elemental nations. Tsunade sighed as she drank from her sake cup. It had been some years since Naruto left, and from what she heard from Kaguya, he was doing good, adopted a girl and even found a fiancé. She was glad for him that he was finally happy and had his own little family. She wished she could visit, but her work had gotten annoying as of late. Ever since Naruto left with the chakra as well as numerous scrolls, things in the new elemental treaty village had been hectic. The Damachiha and other leaders demanded they get Naruto back and their chakra. They complained to her since Shizune, Dara, and herself were the only ones close to him left. She told them he left the realm using his new eyes and hasn't been seen back since. But being the arrogant asshole all of them were, they didn't believe her. She paid them no mind as she was more focused on the ninjas uprising from losing chakra. It was mostly those with Kekai Genkai or Kekai Toda. The Hyugas, majority of the Kiri as well as IWA, since they used Kekai Toda and Genkai the most. Kiri was angry they lost their 7 swords of the mist. Many villages lost special artifacts when Naruto left. Other ninjas like Tenten or Guy were fine, though that girl Tenten was angry at losing the sage's items. She guessed that Naruto took them with him, seeing as he is technically the brother of the sage, so he does have every right to them. For the last years she had to quell uprisings along with the other Kages, badly enough. She kept the fact that 3 people still had chakra. Gaara was often questioned why he still walked around with the gourd of sand on his back. He always said it was to remember Shikaku and what his mother gave him. She desperately wanted to beat the annoying Kages, but Shizen kept scolding her not to. She sighed and went outside to walk around the village. The village was named the Shinobi Village, and each portion that belonged to the original village were called sectors, such as the Konoha sector or the Iwa sector. There weren't much disputes except between the Kumo sector and the Hyuga clan, or the Iwa section and the Aburame clan. Nothing big, just getting to points where they would avoid the other. She shook the thoughts about the annoying village out of her head and continued on her peaceful stroll through the village. She got near her new compound and glared as the Uchiha was standing in front of it. "What the hell do you want, Uchiha?" she says, pinching the bridge of her nose. Sasuke scoffs. "I need your prowess," he says with air quotes at prowess in the medical field. "You have to know some way of regaining what is mine by birthright." "My eyes," he says, glaring. "And another thing I have realized is how you look. You still have that mark on your forehead and you still look young instead of a wrinkly old hag," he says as a fist collides with his face, sending him into the wall. "I may not have chakra, but that doesn't mean I'm not strong on my own. Also, when chakra vanished, I'm guessing the excessing chakra in my seal went through my body to keep my appearance as well as dyeing my skin that color. The only reason Sakura isn't the same is I have had much more time using it than her," she says as she cracks her knuckles. She thankfully held back from using any chakra, as that was all her natural strength. Sasuke got up from the wall and glared at her. "You can't act like that with me, hag. I am an Uchiha," he yells, drawing his sword only for her to grab it and snap it like it was a twig. "I told you, I am strong even without chakra, and you are just a spoiled boy who lost his precious eyes. I am still a Kage and someone strong enough to back up my title, so I leave before I break your skull," she says, glaring and releasing her killing intent on him. He looks unaffected but sweats a small amount as he walks away, discarding the sword. She picks it up to reveal it wasn't broken as she chucked it over the wall of her compound. Genjutsus were a good thing to mess with the brat. She really wished Naruto would have killed the annoying boy, but oh well, he isn't powerful anymore, now he's just an annoying brat. She sighed again as she saw Hinata walking towards her with a nervous smile. Over the years she had talked with the shy Hyuga, and the girl apologized for betraying Naruto as she was afraid of going against her clan and the villagers. She thought about asking Naruto to give her back chakra but erased that thought as one. The girl had the same amount of courage of a groundhog after seeing its shadow too. She feared what her clan would do if they found out she had it. They might even start making her a breeding stock, which made her shudder. She kept to having her as an ally and a new student. Sakura had lost all her respect when she helped Sasuke and the other Kages chain up Naruto. If only she had gotten her before all this. The Byakugan was a great tool for medics. "Hi Lady Tsunade. How has your day been?" she asks, nervous. Tsunade looks over the girl and nods. "Just the usual annoying work and complaining from people for me to bring back someone I can't, as he left the realm and I don't blame him for leaving," she says as she sighs. Do you still hear from Naruto? Is he happy?" she asks with a frown. Tsunade nods and walks past her. "He is happy and he forgives you, so don't be so sad. Now come along, we have muscle training to do. Just because you have that huge chest under that jacket doesn't mean you can't be strong," she says with a smirk. Hinata blushes dark red and nods. "Why yes, Lady Tsunade," she says as she follows after her new teacher. Naruto wiped sweat off his forehead. He may be a stamina powerhouse, but learning new things always tired him out as he wasn't used to them. Over the years he theorized all the combinations to make Kekai Genkai and Tota. So far, the Genkai ones he knew of were Scorch, Explosion, Lava, Boil, Blaze, but that was Amaterasu, Swift, Ice, Magnet, Storm, Dark, Wood and Crystal, while he only really knew of Dust for Tota, as not many people had 3 affinities nor the imagination to test them out. He theorized he could add Wind and Earth to make pure Sand, Fire and Yang would make pure Heat, which was different from Scorch. Wind and Yin would make Sound, Wind and Yang might make Typhoon, Lightning and Yang would make Light, Earth and Yang would make Land, Water and Yin would make Brine, and then Water and Yang would make Wave. He had no idea how to test out any of those, and he didn't really want to as he had a bad experience with things exploding in his face. He focused on what he had scrolls of and knew what they looked like. Most of them came easy to him as he had used some of them before when he had the Bijuu in him. Magnet, Lava and Boil came to him easy as they were the elements of Shikaku, Son Goku and Kokuo respectively. Storm, Swift and Wood he already could use with some mastery since he taught 2 of them to Talia. Though he realized that her storm was different than his. His needed lightning and water while hers only needed lightning and wind. He chalked it up to her being a child of Zeus and the whole no water thing. Similar to how Percy can't be in the air. He had also seen dust, dark, explosion, ice, scorch and crystal before through his life from enemies he had fought. So far, he could use the basics for them all and mastery in the few he knew best. He might not use much of them, but it was best to be fully rounded. Dark wasn't useful since only Talia and Annabeth had chakra. Explosion he could use for an ace, ice could be interesting, scorch could be interesting with his Rasengan or truth-seeking orbs. Crystal would be a strong defense if he studied with it more. He noticed it was getting around dinner time. Hopefully nothing bothersome had happened. He exited the clearing after feeding his tree. He entered camp to see Talia and Annabeth getting ready for capture the flag. Bianca seemed to be sitting out of it as her brother got excited and all geared up with Percy, who seemed to still be upset as the boy looked to him and glared. Naruto sighed and walked over to his daughter. Don't be too cocky, Talia, by using your powerful techniques or showing off, he says, bopping her head. She chuckled. Don't worry, I won't be doing that. Only with Zoe, as it is a bit of revenge for the past, but I won't go overboard, she says as she draws out her Kiba blades as Annabeth readies her knives. Also watch out, apparently something happened to Artemis and Zoe tried to leave while we slept, she says looking over to Zoe. He sighs and pats her head. We'll figure out what to do later, so no worries, he says with a smile until he hears the hunters. You aren't joining, boy? Afraid we might beat you, one hunter says, making the others laugh at him. He chuckled and flared his eyes as looks to them. Girls, I don't doubt your skills, but I am someone who has defeated 2 gods and 1 goddess. If I thought I could most likely defeat all of you with one technique, and no, I am not being arrogant, I am confident, he says as they silence up and go back to getting ready. Talia chuckles. Why don't you join us, Dad? It would be insane if you fought, she said, smiling brightly at her dad. He chuckles. Nah, if I did it would get too crazy, and even if this game is stupid, it does help get them a bit ready, he says as he waves them off and goes to sit next to Bianca. He smiles to her as the others get ready. Not joining? He asks as she nods. I'm not the fighting kind, and it seems dangerous. I tried to get my brother to not go either, but he was too excited, she says with a sigh. Yeah, my daughter can be the same, but don't worry, no one truly gets too hurt here. It is mostly just a game for them, he says, calming her nerves. Is Talia really your daughter? You don't look old enough to be 1 inch, she asks, curious. He laughs. No, I am not her biological father, I am her adoptive father, as I saved her and looked after her for nearly 4 or so years. She saw me as a father and I accepted it, he said as he smiled at his daughter as she and Annabeth made plans for the game. He had a strong feeling Percy was going to be an idiot during this. Hopefully Talia could smack some sense into him. He relaxed and waited for it all to go crazy. Talia. Now I think this time we can actually win against them. Annabeth would provide defense with Percy and Clarice, while myself and Luke can go offensive with some other campers. The rest will provide defense against the hunters when they come for the flag, she says, getting some nods from others. Why do you get to go for the flag? One camper yells. Because I have been trained by my father and have the use of his energy like Annabeth does, and I can cause the most damage to them. Luke is coming along because he is the best swordsman here, she says, getting grumbles of acceptance from them. Ready for this, Luke? She asks with a smirk. Think you can keep up with me? She says, making him chuckle. Luke smirks. Oh yeah, I can, especially with the new sword your dad gave me, he says, drawing the jian from his waist. It had a black sheath and a brown handle. Talia smirked. Sword of Kusanagi. Suits you. If Dad gave you that, it means he trusts you, she says as everyone gets ready. Annabeth frowned as she stood near the flag watching Talia and Luke talk. She hoped that Talia felt towards Luke like she did, like a brother. She also sighed as Percy tried to flirt a bit with her in his awkward way. She wondered how he didn't realize she didn't like him like that. Plus, he was the son of Poseidon, so it wouldn't work between them, as well as the fact that she liked girls, so that was another reason it wouldn't work. She shook the thoughts out of her head as the game began. Talia smirked as she ran through the forest with Luke. She charged her blades with lightning chakra and was getting excited. She saw arrows flying towards her as she cut them easily. Her father had trained her to block projectiles of much faster speed and of stronger metal. Luke also was making quick speed of striking down arrows with his sword that seemed cut through them like they were nothing. Naruto told him this sword of Kusanagi would cut through anything, seemed like he spoke the truth. He and Talia quickly reached the flag to see Zoe and two other hunters. "You take the two, I want Zoe," she says, charging her blades again and dashing towards her. Luke chuckled and readied himself for the hunters. He had to change his style a bit to get used to it, but it wasn't as bad as he thought. Talia smirks as she makes Zoe back up. "This all is what my dad taught me," she says as she overcharges her blades to make an explosion as she strikes down. In the smoke she quickly summons a lightning clone and shadow clone to go steal the flag and take it back to the other side. She had the lightning one guard the shadow clone. She just hoped nothing happened to it, but whoever hits it will get zapped very badly. When the smoke cleared, Zoe glared at her and attacked in a fury of anger. She could not be beaten by the supposed daughter of that man. It angered her more that the girl was able to block all her hits. She was about to attack again when the horn blew. She looked in shock until she looked behind her and saw the flag was gone. "My dad isn't the only one who uses clones," she says, heads back and glares at Percy, who was twitching after he ran into her clones and nearly lost them the game. Luckily Annabeth was there to carry it across. "What the hell, Percy? I had it, why the hell did you try and sneak across?" "My clones had it, but you nearly cost us the game by attacking them blindly when they burst through the clearing," she yells, pinching her nose. "Well, I thought I could help," he says as Luke walks through with his sword sheathed away. "You should have faith in your comrades and their strength." "Talia and I had it under control," he says until Percy snaps. "Stop yelling at me," he yells, hitting Talia with water subconsciously. Talia glares at him and sparks up with chakra and pokes his chest, sending him blasting back with lightning. "Don't get angry, take your scolding s like a man instead like a bratty kid," she yells as he gets up. "It was an accident," he yells, hitting her with more water. "It wasn't an accident. You are being a brat and we're tired of being scolded for your idiocy, so stop hitting me with water or I will really get pissed," she yells, sealing her swords away. Percy, feeling cocky, summons more water. "Bring it. At least my dad is a god and wants me," he yells, making everyone back away, and glares at him. Talia releases a great amount of Ki as her body was enshrouded with black lightning. "My dad is a million times better than any god. He saved me. He trained me. And he loves me, so shut up about him," she yells as she dashes towards him faster than he expected. She hits him strongly in the jaw, sending him crashing through the ground and a tree. "Enough!" Chiron yells, but no one listens until Naruto appears between them. "Both of you stop it," he says in an authoritative voice. Talia frowns and lowers her black lightning armor and looks guilty. Percy, on the other hand, is having nothing of this. "I'm tired of you constantly calling me an idiot," he yells, controlling water around him. Naruto sighs, "I will stop doing it when you stop being an idiot. Now stop this stupid shit," he yells, casting Percy in a sleep genjutsu, making the boy pass out and douse himself in water. He sighed as Zoe walked in and looked around in confusion. Everyone else gasped at the sight. The oracle came out from the attic and appeared before Talia. She looked around confused as it spoke to her. "Speak, child of Zeus, for the prophecy to save the goddess," it said, making Zoe glare. Talia looked to her father, who nodded and smiled at her. "Okay, oracle, what is my prophecy to save the goddess?" "And prophecy won't rhyme too well, but I'll try my best," Smoke poured out of the oracle's mouth and she took the form of a blonde woman with a gigantic chest that made her self-conscious. She had a diamond on her forehead and her shirt was very revealing. Talia knew it was Tsunade, but she thought her dad was being fictitious about the whole giant chest part. 6 shall go west to the goddess in chains. Close call in the land without rain. The bane of Olympus will be brought in. A helper can show the trail. Campers and hunters combined prevail. Titan's curse must one withstand. And they all can be saved by her parents' hand, she says, before falling down. Luckily, she landed on Percy, who awoke from his genjutsu and let out a high-pitched scream. Camp Council. After Grover and Percy put the oracle away, the meeting took place. Clearly this talks about Artemis, as she is the only goddess missing according to Miss Nightshade, Chiron says with a frown. Yes. And the hunters will go west to save her. Zoe yells, slamming her hands on the table. No. The oracle gave me the quest. It said hunters and campers combined prevail, so as much as I hate to admit it, we need to work together or everything can go downhill and your precious lady won't be saved, she says, staring the girl down. Zoe was about to speak up when she was interrupted. That is why you are coming along. You probably know most of Artemis's patterns and ways of hunting and tracking, she says, making Zoe nod and sit down. Also, I am bringing along Annabeth, Luke and Grover. The last spot can go to a hunter of your choice, Nightshade, she says, getting nods from the people she chose. Wait. I think I need to be on this quest, Percy says, making Talia groan. Shut up, Jackson. Stop trying to be a glory hog. One Ares camper yells at him. You shut up. I know I need to be on this quest, he says, glaring out into the crowd. Grover looks nervous, Annabeth scoffs, Luke just shakes his head and Talia laughs. You think I am going to let you in after you insulted my dad and hit me with water numerous times, she says, glaring at him. Well, he isn't a god and mine is, he mumbles, making Talia glare at him. He may not be a god, but he is as strong as one and a better father than any damn god, so shut up, Jackson, before I break something, she says as she walks out. We leave tomorrow morning, so meet by my old tree, she says as Annabeth follows after. I swear I was this close to killing Jackson, she says as Annabeth nods. He really needs to learn to think before he speaks. Naruto is a great father, she says as they get to the cabin to see her dad smiling near the fireplace. So how did the meeting go? Hopefully no one but Percy was too annoying, he says, taking a sip of his hot chocolate. Talia groans and retells the meeting and sighs. Why don't you want to come? She asks with a frown. He sets down his cup and sighs. I have something I need to take care of and I trust in both of your abilities and skills. Also, if you do need help, I am but a call away with the marker I gave either you, Annabeth or Luke, he says, ruffling her hair. Plus, who knows, one of you might actually need to call me if the last line means anything, since it said her father and was talking to you, he said as he stood up. Talia nods. I will make you proud, Dad, she says as she heads to her room. Annabeth bows slightly to him, confusing him as she followed after Talia. He chuckled as he felt Hestia's arms hug around him and as she kisses his neck. I have it set up for tomorrow, you just need to gather your weapons as you aren't allowed to use any of your jutsus or your eyes in battle. You can still use chakra as long as it doesn't make projectiles or in the form of jutsus. Also, no cloaked form, she says as he nods. She made sure of everything before coming here. She had never wanted to get out of her oath this badly, mostly because she never found a man she loved like this. No man had ever even caught her attention. He smiles and strokes her cheek. Don't worry, I can do this. I just want to make sure nothing happens to Talia. So you set it for night? He asks, getting a nod from her. Yes, they only do this at night as it is when Styx is strongest and can manifest herself, so no worries, she says as she pulls him to the bed. You need your rest, so let's get some sleep, she says, making him lay as she laid in his arms. I love you, Hestia, he said, kissing her deeply. She returned the kiss and smiled at him. I love you too, Naruto, she says as they fall asleep. Next morning. Naruto stood next to the quest group and smiled. Apparently, a son of Hermes had pranked the hunter Zoe chose, so now only 5 and were considering the hunter. The close call in the land without rain as centaur blood was quite poisonous. They were still going and they offered him the extra place. He still turned down the offer as he needed to be ready for the fight with Palace. Be safe while you are out and be on guard. I hope everything goes well, he says, getting nods from everyone but Zoe. He pulled Talia away for a moment. If you need to summon me, do it away from Zoe and tell the same to Luke and Annabeth, okay? He asks, getting a nod from her. Okay Dad, I'll be safe. Love you, she says, kissing his cheek. He smiles and kisses the top of her head. Love you too, now go and get this over with, he said with a smirk as they head off. He frowns as he sees Percy head for the Pegasus stable. He went to his clearing and summoned a hawk. The hawk was medium-sized and a coal-black color. He then realized he hadn't summoned a hawk. It was a crow, and the same one that Itachi forced down his mouth. He shuddered and looked down at it. It still had the Sharingan in it, and it seemed to be okay with him as it went up his arm. Okay, wrong summon, but why are you here? Weren't you Itachi's summon? He asks the bird. The crow nods and caws. I think since that Uchiha burnt it with Amaterasu's flames it became loyal to her, and I think she sent it to you. It says it's willing to lose its eye as long as you revive its old one with your mark, Shinju said, translating it for him. Naruto looked at the crow. It went to his forearm so he could look at it. If you really are okay with it, he said, carefully extracting the Mangekyo Sharingan to see it had changed. Let me guess, since Grandma has connections to the Sharingan, she evolved it? He asked, getting a nod from the crow. Yes, that is true. Since she is the leader of the Shinto religion and the eye came from Kaguya's descendants, she can alter it how she wishes, Shinju says, proving his thoughts to be true. He quickly sealed it away and put his sun mark on the crow, returning its eye to him. The crow cawed and flapped its wings. Since you are here, can you do something for me? Follow a boy on a flying horse that I suspect you will be taking, he asks, getting a nod from the bird as it flew away. He sighed and sat down. He quickly got a solution for the eye to stay in already. He screwed the glass jars shut and stared at the Sharingan in it. He guessed his grandmother sent it to him for Talia, but he wanted to wait a bit longer before giving it to her. He felt giving her a Sharingan would just complicate things and make things more hectic. His daughter was plenty strong, but having a Sharingan would protect her more and ease some worries he has whenever she leaves him, plus it was evolved by his grandmother, so no blindness threat from it. He sighed and sealed the jar away and frowned as he saw a black horse fly away with the crow shortly behind. He should have stopped the boy before he left, but if he did that, the boy would have denied everything. At least this way he can yell at him for being an idiot. He had a feeling that he'd be called by his daughter soon to get rid of the boy, possibly, or even yell at him. He left to go gather his weapons and any gear he needed as he felt he might be pulled into the quest soon. He wanted to leave that to his daughter, but between him or Percy on the quest, he was more wanting him on it than the idiotic son of Poseidon. Talia, few hours later. So far, the quest was going nicely. Zoe had interrogated a monster to get info about a meeting up of some high-ranking people in Kronos' army at the museum. They had no idea if he was telling the truth. She wished her father was there as he could sense negative emotions whenever he wanted to. Talia frowned as they arrived at the museum and found someone she was not looking forward to. Percy had literally crashed into her. Hi? He said before getting kneed in the junk and promptly falling to the ground. Damn it, Jackson. You are not forcing yourself on my quest. She yells as she turns to Annabeth. Go call my dad in the main room with Grover, she says, getting a nod from the two as they rush off. After a couple minutes of wheezing, Percy groans, monsters coming, skeletons in general. Artemis on mountain, he said, in a hoarse voice. Zoe glares down at him. He can't be here, boy, she says in a deadly tone. He isn't lying, they hear a voice say behind them. Talia smiled at her dad. Sorry for calling you so fast, but Percy tagged along, and if Percy is true, this general might be hard, she says with a frown. He ruffles her hair as the crow landed on his shoulder. Relax, it is fine. I just have to leave tonight as I have an appointment, but I'll return in the morning, he says as he activates his eyes. Percy, you are going back to camp. You can't force yourself on every quest, he says as Percy disappears in a swirl. I will send a clone back at camp to work as a root, so he should be fine. I can sense some big energies coming this way. I can hold back the stronger ones as you focus on the others and escape back to the van and head west, he said, getting nods from them all, even Zoe. The others are heading towards the entrance to block you, so some fighting will be expected, he says as he hears a familiar roar. So the lioness reformed, and I think it remembers my smell, he says with a chuckle. I'd leave as my fights can be destructive, he said in a serious tone as he went into his cloaked form and the crow dispels. Talia nodded. You heard him. Let's move out. She yells, getting them to head to the entrance. They hurry out as Naruto stretches and readies himself. Seconds later, a massive lion bursts from the doors in front of him. It looked larger than last time and much more pissed off as it glared at him and roared loudly as it pounced on him. He quickly slides under it and fires truth-seeking orbs at it to keep it away. He frowned as he noticed it was keeping its mouth closed. He remembered that Hercules used his strength to kill it. He had Tsunade's super strength technique, but he doubted he could get it to let him beat it without it trying to claw his eyes out. Susanoo was a bit too big for this small enclosure, as he wanted to try and hold off on destroying buildings for something like the lioness, and the only thing devastating enough would be a Bijudama or a Raisin Shuriken, and even then, it would cause a lot of damage to the area around him. He would have used his Kamui to draw the lioness into his dimension, but Percy wasn't out of it yet, as he had yet to send a clone back to camp to return him there. He smiled as he started to run his hands through the hand signs. When you need something that can destroy something but not cause too much damage, why not make something that explodes in a contained area? A white see-through cube with a small white orb in the middle materialized in his hands as he threw it to the beast as it expanded and encased it. Dust style, detachment of the primitive world, he said, as the orb exploded in a massive burst, killing the beast. He smirked as it left behind a large pelt, its skull and a femur that from what he could feel were incredibly durable. He sealed them away as he heard clapping behind him. He turned around and drew his truth-seeking orbs again and readied them to be fired. The man had dark slicked back hair and eyes the color of stone. He had light brown skin and was very muscular. He was wearing a fancy business suit, but it occasionally flashed to Greek armor as if waiting for battle. Who are you, and why shouldn't I blast you like I did the lioness for the second time? He asked, making his eyes spin, ready to summon a Susanoo. He felt like he would need it. Not destroying the building didn't matter as the man gave off a powerful aura. The man in front of him felt incredibly dark, and the only reason he was still standing was he felt the man might know where Artemis was. My name is inconsequential to you, but I think you would do well on my side instead of the puny demigods and the damn gods, he says with a sneer. Naruto's memory finally caught up to him. The stone ice took a while to notice, as the man wasn't as noticeable when he wasn't under the sky. Atlas, Titan of endurance, astrology, and strength. If you are out from under the sky, I think I might know where Artemis is, he says with a smirk as Atlas glares at him. So, it is true, you can find out about anyone from looking at them. Seems I can let you leave just yet, he says as his suit changes to armor and a sword materializes in his hand as he charges him. Naruto quickly fires his orbs at him to find them not affecting him as he ducks under a slice only to get his by a strong knee through the wall. He spat out some blood as his grandfather healed him. Oh, you definitely hit harder than Ares, but so do I, he said as he warped using a throne marker to appear under him and hits him with a Tsunade strength uppercut. Atlas shrugged it off and sent him crashing back. Naruto smirked and made his eyes spin faster. Susanoo, he says, creating the massive skeleton construct form around him. It was a complete Susanoo, as it had weapons as well. Atlas grew slightly worried as the sword he broke under the punch of the skeleton thing the Son of Chaos created. He wasn't able to dodge the punch as it sent him crashing through several walls. The second he stood up, he saw the thing draw back a giant arrow to send firing towards him. He barely had any time to dodge and got a nasty cut on his arm from it, and he felt it burn badly. He feared he wasn't strong enough to fight him right now, so he flashed away. Naruto sighed and eased out of his Susanoo. His strength was nothing compared to Atlas, but he was the Titan of strength after all. He felt a new pull of his markers and flashed to it after bashing off his pants. He saw they were on a train with a bunch of high-end cars. So, I'm glad to see you all got out safely, he said with a smile. What happened to you? Talia asked, worried, as her father's clothes had some bloodstains and a bruise on his face that was disappearing. He nodded. Yes, I am fine. I just was roughed up a bit by a titan, but I got rid of the lioness, he said as he unsealed the pelt as it transformed into a jacket. It had 2 coattails in the back and sleeves with fur trim. The hood was the same way with fur trim. He handed it to Annabeth. Keep it, since I don't need it and Talia has one. You might as well do the same, he said as he sat down. Annabeth smiled and she put it on. Talia smiled. Looks good on you, Annabeth, she said as she sat next to her father. Annabeth blushed dark, though no one but Naruto noticed as it was dark inside. Now I think I know where Artemis is being held at, but it is a dangerous area, he says with a frown. Zoe frowns. If the general is who I believe it, she is at Mount Othries, she says with a frown. He nods yes, and with Atlas out from under it, I fear Artemis is holding the sky, he says as he looks out the window of the train car. It is getting late and I have something I must do. Call for me when you reach the land without rain, he said as he kissed Talia's head. Stay safe and I love you, he said as he stood. She smiled and nodded. Love you too, Dad. Good luck, she said, winking at him as she knew what he was doing. He nodded to the others and smiled. Keep strong. I know you all can do this, he said as Luke nodded and gave him a look that read that he'd look after them while he left to do what he must. Naruto smiled and flashed away. He arrived at the underworld to see Hades standing there next to Hestia. He nodded to Hades, who smiled and nodded back. He saw a woman with glowing green hair with streaks of blue and murky swirling green eyes. She had a shadowing dress that reminded him of Hades's, but he knew she was Styx. Next to the woman was a man with dark brown hair and red eyes. He had bronze armor on and a Greek great sword in hand. The man gave off a similar aura to Ares, but more refined and much less enraging. Styx steps forward and smiles. So you are the male that is a relationship with Hestia and wishes to abolish the oath she made with me to be a virgin. To do so you need to defeat my husband in battle. You cannot use your chakra other than for physical strength. You can use one blade and none of its abilities, she says as Pallas steps forward and smiles at him. It wasn't a condescending smile like how Ares did, this seemed kind. I can see a seasoned warrior in you. If you were allowed to use all your techniques, I know I would fall very quickly, he said as he stepped into a clearing. Naruto nodded and unsealed Yamato and held the sheath in hand to use it as a shield of sorts. He hoped he could put enough power behind Yamato. Pallas nodded in appreciation of the blade and readied himself. I am not arrogant, but no one has defeated me in honorable battle. Sure, others have in normal combat, but they relied on their special abilities too much, he said with a smile. Naruto nodded. Well, I am winning. I want to be with the woman I love without fear of breaking the oath, he said as he brought the blade in front of him. Ready on your call, he said to Styx. She smiled and nodded. Begin, she says, and instantly Pallas is at him. He blocks with his sword and found that Pallas hit incredibly hard. Luckily, right before he hit, Naruto used the sheath to block. He ducked under another swing and tried to hit Pallas, but was blocked by the hilt of his sword and kicked away. Naruto used Yamato to slow himself down by stabbing it in the ground. He needed to make sure he hit Pallas hard and fast. He infused his chakra in his fist and struck Pallas's sword and quickly swung Yamato at him, making him skid back. Pallas was back on him in an instant with a fury of powerful strikes. Lucky his instincts kept him from getting hit. He swept a kick to Pallas' legs and made him buckle before landing a strong hit to his jaw. Pallas tumbled back but righted himself before charging again. He cursed as Pallas seemed to be unaffected by anything he did. Titans were an entirely different caliber than the gods. Pallas's hits were nearly as hard as Atlas and his sword skills were much greater. He needed to distract Pallas enough to land a full charge hit on the Titan with his sword, since he could channel it into the blade more than he could his fist. He blocked another strike from Pallas and leaped up, kneeing the Titan in the face. Pallas staggered a bit and smirked. Naruto decided to try something that nearly got his grandfather once. He threw up the sheath, distracting Pallas slightly as he swung the sword horizontally. Pallas easily moved his sword to block, but Naruto dropped the sword, grabbed it with his other hand in a reverse grip and slashed under Pallas's guard with all the strength he could. Pallas wasn't ready for it as he was sent crashing back into his wife's river. Naruto quickly grabbed the sheath as it fell and stood ready for retaliation until he heard laughter. "I have got to say I have never seen that before," Pallas says as he climbs out of the river with a smirk. "I will definitely have to use that next time I fight one of my annoying siblings," he says as he extends a hand to him. Naruto smiled and shook his hand. "It's called Hidden Vine and only someone with reflexes like crazy or someone who has seen it before would be able to block it. The only one who blocked it was my grandfather as he taught me my skills with the sword," he said, getting a nod from Pallas. Pallas turns to Styx. "He definitely beat me in honorable combat, even with that distraction it was still honorable." "He passes," he said, rubbing her shoulder. She smiled and turned to Hestia. "I erase your vow and free you from it." "Have fun," she says, waving with a wink as she and Pallas disappear. Naruto falls down 2 titans in a row, and I have got to say Pallas was the trickier one, he said as Hestia sat next to him worried. "What happened today? Last I heard you weren't getting involved in the quest, and when did you have to fight a titan?" she asks, confused and worried. He sighs. "It was either I go or Percy tags along, and I didn't want that boy's idiocy to endanger my daughter. Oh yeah, I forgot to summon a clone to drop him off." He quickly does that before leaning against her. She nodded in agreement, as did Hades. Both worried about how stupid the boy could be. "How is the quest?" she asks. He sighs. "It's going fine, we know where she is and we just have to get there." "Is Zeus awake?" he asks as she shakes her head. "Great, then we can fly," he said as he stood and helped her up. She was still blushing as Hades turned around with a smirk. He kissed her lovingly. "I love you, Hestia, we can talk more later, maybe after the quest," he said, making her smile and nod as he flashed away after giving Hades a smile and nod. After he left, Hades smiled to his sister. "So am I going to get any nephews or nieces from you?" he asked before running away with a smile from the embarrassed, blushing flaming goddess. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.